arrow, but fruit flies like a banana. I mean, fruit flies don't fly like a banana. Even bananas probably don't fly like bananas. Not like I've seen a banana fly. Have you seen... I'm just saying that fruit flies like a banana, okay? I'm sorry, the other day I slipped and hit my head. I still feel a bit woozy and, well, sorry if I don't make much sense. Jason Padgett also didn't make much sense after he was hit in the head in 2002. He was an ordinary adolescent. He didn't do that well in school and considered math useless. One September night, he was out on one of the many night outs he had, and after singing karaoke at a pub, Jason was just about to call it a night. Before he knew it, he'd been hit in the back of his head by two men, beaten profusely and left there with his injuries. People at the hospital sent him home after diagnosing a concussion and a bleeding kidney, thinking nothing more of it. In Jason's head, however, things were far worse. He, almost overnight, developed an intense germophobia and a general OCD with things. He would wash his hands over and over again, and completely locked himself into his home. It was during one of those many hand washes that he noticed the water streaming down the sink. Instead of seeing the droplets slowly recede into the sink like usual, he noticed an almost fragmented reality. It was like a video, he says, that he watched frame by individual frame. He would spend hours trying to draw what he saw in the form of fractal diagrams. One day, he was drawing them while he was at a mall, and a person walking by him took keen interest. He happened to be a mathematician, who for once could appreciate what Jason was seeing in all its mathematical glory. He explained to Jason that the things he was describing were discoveries that were Nobel Prize worthy, and that he should really consider focusing on it full time. At this time, Jason thought he was going insane. He even contacted psychologists about his symptoms. They eventually diagnosed him with acquired savant syndrome and placed him in a synesthesia group study. Synesthesia is a phenomenon of sensory hyperconnectivity where one can experience multimodal sensations, like seeing sound or tasting a memory. Some of our favorite musicians like Lord and Pharrell Williams have it, and Jason was diagnosed with some version of it, although in his case, it's expressed in math rather than music. Jason has now become a number theorist. Scientists say the region of the brain that allows savants to do what they do exists in all of us. It just so happens that most of us don't have access to them. So there could be a number theorist in all of us. Anybody could be anything. Anything could be in anything. But wait, maybe I'm just losing my mind again. Everything cannot be in everything. A country, for example, cannot be in another country, can it? Presenting to you Dahala Kagrabari. It's a part of India within a part of Bangladesh within a part of India. Let me explain. An enclave is a part of a country that is surrounded by foreign territory. The Vatican City is one such enclave. But contrary to the Vatican, where people speak Italian, people living in places like Dahala Kagrabari speak a different language, are part of a different culture, and, quite simply, live a different life. Dahala Kagrabari was one of only 3 third-order enclaves, meaning it is an enclave within another enclave within another enclave. How did this all come to be? Well, this bizarre geographic anomaly seems to have been caused by an equally bizarre pastime. Chess. Yes, when kings of the 18th century weren't executing people at will, they were playing chess with them. It seems to be a result of this chess playing that entire groups of people were just moved around at a time where the borders were yet to be drawn. Fast forward 300 years, the borders are here, but their situation was largely unresolved. These people had no legal existence or a way to get into their homeland. They were not granted basic necessities by the government or the territory in which they reside. After the independence wars in the 20th century in the Indian subcontinent, these enclaves persisted for an additional 80 years before finally, in 2015, it was ceded to Bangladesh by India. Up until then, of course, Dahala Kagrabari was in India. Or was it Bangladesh? I don't know. Now, there are more bizarre things in this world, of course. For example, the group of people that wear sunglasses at night. I mean, what are you doing? Where is the sun? sunglasses were clearly invented to protect your eyes against the sun, right? Well, not exactly. Turns out, sunglasses were invented for justice. No, not that kind of justice. Sunglasses were most likely popularized by the Chinese in the 1200s. Their purpose? So that the judges can impartially interrogate witnesses without giving away their facial expressions. The eyes can do a lot of the talking, and judges at the time had to dissociate themselves from the people they were about to question. Anyone who has tried to lie or has been lied to knows that the eyes can do a lot of talking in tense situations. Speaking of tense situations, you know the time when man traveled 310,000 kilometers on a journey never before done to walk on the surface of the moon? Well, Neil Armstrong and the Apollo 11 crew made that journey and came back to tell the tale. Of course, they didn't know whether they were going to come back or not. In fact, a lot of the trial runs resulted in the loss of life even before anything left the ground. They were all military servicemen, and so the thought of not coming back wasn't unforeseen. But at least they wanted to ensure the well-being of their loved ones if they couldn't make it. Now, insurance companies know a risky bet when they see one, and to say that going to the moon was risky would be an understatement. So of course, the crew had to improvise. The crew ended up signing hundreds of autographs, with the hope that if they failed to return, the value of their signatures alone would see out the families for the rest of their lives. Of course, those autographs were never needed in the end. But it's interesting to wonder what a Neil Armstrong NFT could be worth in today's money. But willing to spend so much money on NFTs is kinda strange. Even sinful, some might say. This is not the only sinful desire we have in our day-to-day ruminations, of course. It's remarkable how little has changed in that respect. Promiscuity was perhaps harder to get away with back then, but that didn't stop people from trying. One devout Christian, however, Lamarcus Thompson, wanted people to use their time for less sinful endeavors. He wanted to build something that would take people's minds away from the pubs, the saloons, and the brothels that they used to go to. He got inspiration from a coal-carrying train in Pennsylvania. The train would slowly carry coal over a mountain before dropping 60 feet under the force of gravity. Now, that may not sound like much of a thrill ride compared to the things we do today, but in the 1800s, the 60-mile-per-hour speed of this train was enough to accelerate passengers. Thompson sold his hosiery business and devoted all his time to build what would be the world's first amusement-themed roller coaster. After months and months of designs, Thompson eventually built a 50-foot-high, 600-feet switchback roller coaster in a place known for being promiscuous, Coney Islands. At just 6 miles per hour, this was far slower than anything you and I would consider exciting. But it was such a novelty at the time that when the business took off, Thompson was making well over $15,000 per day. From making underwear to thrilling people into needing more, Thompson died a very rich man. Speaking of underwear, Norway is now calling its military conscripts to return underwear worn during conscription. The obligation seems to have arisen from pandemic-related shortages in the past years. But then again, this is not the first time Norway's resources were spread thin. In 2011, Norway went through a butter crisis that led to more than just dry toast. The regularity with which people in Norwegian cultures consume butter means that when the news of the shortage reached people's ears, butter stocks ran off the shelves in minutes, and there was market-wide inflation. It all started when heavy rainfall in the prior season led to poor grazing, which in turn reduced milk production from the cows. The butter panic eventually affected foreign policy, whereby Norway had to reduce tariffs to make importing butter easier. On an individual level, the effect was just as apparent as people were literally caught smuggling butter through the borders. But I can empathize with the Norwegian people. It is indeed quite infuriating when a system is in place and it doesn't work when you need it most. It's a lot like lab equipment. It always fails when you need it. Anyone who has even spent a brief moment in a lab would know the tension inside that place, simply because very simple things cannot be accomplished when lab equipment is not working. Well, it turns out that happens to the best of us. Wolfgang Pauli, the Austrian theoretical physicist, is known for significant contributions to the field of quantum mechanics, most notably by his Pauli exclusion principle. He was a remarkable theoretical physicist, and spent most of his time with pen and paper rather than with experimental equipment. Hence, It follows that occasionally, whenever Polly would have to deal with equipment, he would break it. It turns out, the faulty equipment became such a regularity that merely his presence was sufficient to convince his peers about why certain equipment failed. They ended up dubbing this phenomenon as the Polly effect, essentially the tendency of lab equipment to fail for seemingly no material reason, other than the presence of a theoretician. The phenomenon had gained so much traction after its inception that Polly's friend, Otto Stern, had literally banned Polly from entering his laboratory, despite them being good friends. Polly even attempted to write an article, Background Physics, to try and explain things inexplicably breaking as soon as he entered a room. Anecdotes followed that Polly's car broke down during his honeymoon, a chair broke down at a Zurich festival for no reason whatsoever, the train station ran into a failure as soon as Polly switched stations, a cyclotron burnt right before his eyes, and so much more. The effect was so eerie that Polly eventually lamented to himself that such mischief had to have been the Polly effect. I guess none of us have destroyed particle accelerators or cyclotrons in our lives yet, but we've all messed up things on paper, like using the wrong units when doing calculations. I'm sure it stings, but my teachers always told me that these mistakes are okay, and that as long as I have the concepts down pat, I'm gonna be alright. Right? Well, not for the pilots of Air Canada Flight 143. On a nice July day, a brand new 767, state-of-the-art at the time, took to the skies to fly from Montreal to Edmonton. Less than halfway through the flight, the pilots noticed a fuel pressure warning on one of the engines. The warnings persisted and eventually rang up for both of the plane's engines. A few minutes later, the engines ran out of fuel entirely, and the plane was essentially turned into a very large and heavy glider. Thanks to the exceptional skill, the plane was eventually able to land at a nearby runway turned drag strip with no loss of life, and only minor injuries that took place during the evacuation. The heroics of the pilots were truly highlighted when months after the incident, different crews across Canada had tried to land a 767 in a simulator under similar conditions. Nobody was able to pull it off. But why did this happen in the first place? After all, it was a brand new plane. Well, it turned out, one of the fuel gauges weren't functioning properly when the plane was being refueled. As a result, the fuel amount had to be manually verified before the plane was given the all-clear from Montreal. It turned out everyone involved in the process was trained in the metric system. But the 767 was one of the first jets where the instruments were reported in imperial units. Essentially, the person who was doing the refueling thought they were loading up the plane with around 22,000 kilograms of fuel, when, in truth, they were really filling it up with 12,000 kilograms of fuel, which conveniently comes up to be around 22,000 in pounds. So, the plane took off with less than half the fuel it needed to complete the trip. So many problems in our lives come from simple miscommunication. It really makes you wonder what the world would be like if, say, we all used the same measurement systems or spoke the same language. But humans, ironically, what makes us strongest also makes us the weakest. It's our ability to work together, or the lack thereof. The fate of our entire species comes down to what we should be able to do the best, but instead, we do the exact opposite. Life has a certain irony to it, and I think it's this irony that not only makes life painful, but also makes life worth living. As Thanos said best, life is perfectly balanced, as all things should be. As I was getting ready to go out the other day, I realized I couldn't button my pants up all the way. I realized I was gravitationally challenged, and that I had been growing in all the wrong directions. So I started doing what any reasonable person would do in my situation. Jogged my way to work every morning, checked the gluten content in my rice I was about to eat, intermittent fasted daily, and ate celery like it was my cheat meal. You know, the usual. It didn't quite work out. But now that I was back from the hospital, and the therapist, I actually found the smart way to lose weight. Play chess. Yes, chess grandmasters actually lose an astonishing amount of weight over competitions. Over a tournament, they have been known to burn over 6,000 calories per day. To put that into perspective, At the peak of his training, this is about as many calories as Usain Bolt ate. Even the obesity-inclined population of the United States only manages to eat about 3,000 calories per day. And as any dietitian would tell you, the concept of weight loss can be simplified down to the ideas of calories in, calories out. If you are eating more than you're burning, you gain weight. But if you are burning more than you're eating, you lose weight. If these chess grandmasters were on the typical American diet, they would still be operating on an astonishing calorie deficit of 2,200 calories. Even bodybuilders who are cutting their calories don't cut more than 300 to 400 per day. Of course, these chess, let's say athletes, know this and eat more to compensate. But it takes quite a bit of eating to do that, and so most grandmasters end up losing a remarkable amount of weight over tournaments. Some of them burn as many calories over a 2-hour game as Roger Federer playing an hour of singles tennis. There was also a championship that was called off simply because the players lost too much weight. It's also baffling considering sedentary games like chess are usually not associated with anything physically intense that could cause such extreme weight loss. Of course, that is until you realize that our brain consumes about 20% of all the calories that we eat. Chess, being one of the more cognitively demanding games out there, ramps up that caloric demand drastically, which would explain this bizarre phenomenon. But anything to lose some weight and look good, right? But if you're in the mood for some delicious calories anyways, why don't you drive to a Michelin star restaurant in a car with Michelin tires? But wait, do the two have anything to do with each other? The tire company was founded in 1889 and certainly predates the restaurant rating franchise, so they certainly weren't founded at the same time. But are they connected is the question. As it turns out, Michelin realized that they need people to buy more cars and drive farther for there to be a profitable demand for their tires. Driving far was something that people at the time were not in the habit of doing, at least not back then. This was partly down to the fact that the transportation revolution had only recently started, and people were accustomed to traveling only as far as a horse carriage would go. To get people going farther to make use of their tires, Michelin came up with the idea of a list that would rank restaurants based on how much travel they warranted. For example, a 1-star restaurant would simply be a good restaurant in its category, not much else to say. A 2-star restaurant would be worth a small detour, and a 3-star restaurant would deserve a trip of its own. The first edition of the guide was given out for free. With nearly 35,000 copies distributed, it mostly contained routes, gas stations, hotels, and so on. With time, the guide, eventually known as the Michelin Guide, gained legitimacy in the food industry to slowly become the hallmark of fine cuisine that we know it to be today. So yes, Michelin tires and Michelin stars are actually related to each other. You know, it's unbelievable how far some companies will go to promote their products. But if what Michelin did wasn't enough for you, let me tell you what Red Bull did to ramp up demand for their energy drink. As energy drinks gained popularity, Red Bull realized they needed to do something to grab people's attention, something a bit unusual. To give people the illusion that Red Bull was in hot demand, the company started filling trash bins around London with empty cans of the drink. They also gave free samples to DJs and intentionally left cans lying around pubs, all to give people the illusion that people couldn't get enough of this drink. And once that gets people thinking, half the job is done. Then they started wondering what about the drink makes it so seemingly popular, and they went ahead and tried it themselves. And that's the story of how the advertising of Red Bull gave it wings. Oh, wait, about that. So, you know how Red Bull's slogan used to be that it gave you wings? Well, Red Bull does not, in fact, give you wings. Of course, you and I know that. Probably. But the fact that they claim it does was considered deceptive advertising by some customers of the drink. The company tried to defend itself by claiming that while it does not give you wings in the physical sense, it does boost cognitive and athletic performance by way of increased reaction speeds and concentration. However, even these claims were somewhat murky and ultimately did not deter a class action lawsuit against Red Bull. The company paid over $13 million to settle the case, and allegedly offered $10 checks to people who were disappointed that the drink did not literally give them wings. I'm not sure whether to be disappointed that people expected an energy drink to actually give them wings, or to be kind of impressed that they actually went on with a case like this and actually got some money out of it. Speaking of energy and concentration, some of us are, well, getting old. And while all that wisdom on Reddit has made us all sages in our own right, our newfound wisdom is showing itself in more than just the memes we share. We're getting wrinkles. Now, I know what you're going to say. Self-love is the one true answer. Love your imperfections, love your wrinkles, and so on and so forth. But if those wrinkles are indeed bothering you, I have the perfect fix for you. Just do what Anatoly Bergotsky did and stick your head into a synchrotron beam. Yes, Anatoly Bergotsky, a Russian particle physicist, was taking the stairs on June 3, 1978, on his way down to the U-70 particle accelerator in Brodvino, south of Moscow. It was the largest particle accelerator in the world at the time, and he was heading down there to fix a simple engineering flaw in the device. As with any such device, there were multiple safety mechanisms, multiple redundancies to prevent exactly what was about to happen. A series of safety failures led to an unlocked door, one which Anatoly walked through to a live particle accelerator. Anatoly had trained to rely on the numerous safeties, and since none of them actually turned on, he carried on with his work. As he bent down towards the beam of the particle accelerator to fix it, Anatoly was hit headfirst with nearly 70 million electron volts. The particles were thought to have deposited 200,000 rads upon entrance into his head. This hyperstimulated the optic nerve, which created a sensation of the brightest light ever, as reported by Anatoly. It takes 10,000 millisieverts to join the Living Dead Club. Anatoly had received 3 million that day. Remarkably, however, he did not feel any pain. He tried going on with his day, but as a particle physicist, he knew all too well what awaited his fate was not very pleasant. And in just the next day, his face would swell up, show burn marks, and he would lose in the region where the beam entered. As symptoms worsened, Anatoly was soon admitted to an ICU, with little hope of surviving. But upon further analysis, it was seen that Anatoly had accidentally received a proton therapy, a form of cancer treatment. That may have been positive news if Anatoly indeed had some form of cancer, but that was not the case. Regardless, the conclusion from the analysis was that despite the tremendous energy of the beam, most of it was never deposited within Anatoly's brain. That is of course not to say that it did no damage, far from it. Even after recovering from the initial radiation poisoning, he kept having occasional seizures and even lost hearing on the side. Oh yeah, and half of his face stopped aging. Even at the time of writing, Anatoly Bergotsky at the age of 79 is very much alive. So next time you're at the dermatologist for a lift, go ahead and save yourself some money by simply sticking your head into the nearest particle accelerator instead. But don't let Anatoly's symptoms fool you. Radiation can sometimes be good for you. Just ask the people of Chernobyl. Well, some of them anyway. There's a concept in mammalian physiology known as hormesis. Basically, it's the biological equivalent of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Now, don't take that statement like gospel just yet. For us humans, it applies to things in small doses. Perhaps the most commonly known example is that of microfractures. If you do high-impact training of some sort, you might cause microfractures on some bones in your body. The fractures are enough to initiate healing and repair, but they are usually not debilitating like an actual fracture. Over time, these fractures heal. They heal back stronger. This process is known as hormesis, and this type of a response is known as a hormetic response. Hormesis occurs in many other facets of our lives as well. Some biologists hypothesize that hormesis is exactly the reason why people should eat their vegetables, since vegetables engage a stress response in our body that causes it to fight back stronger. Cold showers are also another type of hormetic stress. These stress responses are so beneficial over the course of a lifetime that hormesis is now being studied more deeply solely for its anti-aging properties. Now, keep in mind, I said in small doses. If you run a marathon without any training, your body won't be in a position to build back stronger, even if you manage to slug your way through all 26.2 miles. If you punch a hole so hard that you break your hand into pieces, don't expect some hormetic response to grow you an extra limb. Not that you should be punching walls, but you get the point. Now, Hormesis is so extensive within our physiology that even low doses of radiation, the poisonous, deadly radiation, have been shown to induce hormesis. People around the world who live near higher, but not extreme, levels of ionizing background radiation, either due to geography or their profession, have contributed to over 3,000 research papers that have failed to find any evidence for the harmful effects of radiation under 10 centigrades. For reference, 100 centigrades per year for 7 years would lead to symptoms of chronic radiation exposure, so we're not talking about that much exposure here. Just a small dose of potentially lethal radiation. No biggie. The 9,000 or so cleanup workers at Chernobyl were exposed to around 5 centigrades. The rate of cancer deaths among these workers was actually 12% lower than the general Russian population. Twin pregnancies also receive twice as many radiobiological examinations, which is something people are afraid to do due to the radiation involved. But there are studies that show that there's a considerably reduced risk of cancer for twins. Breast cancer rates were also 29% lower for mothers of twins, after being adjusted for age and financial circumstances. So, there you have it. In a literal sense, what doesn't kill you really does make you stronger. Or gives you radiation sickness. I guess it's really just a coin flip. Okay. Computer. It's a simple word, but if you think of it, this word has been radically redefined since being coined in the 1600s. At first, it actually referred to people who did calculations or observed or surveyed things. Then, it was used to refer to really large mechanical machines that are much bigger than the rooms most of you are in. And now, computers are, well, everywhere. There are electronic devices. Laptops are computers. Tablets are computers. Phones, watches, even your refrigerator. It's all so startling, which is also another curious word. It is unique because it's the only 9-letter word that can have a letter taken away, one at a time, and still have 9 different words made out of it. From startling to starting to staring, string, sting, sing, sin, in. I was in an exam the other day, and I was supposed to upload my solutions online. Because, well, it's 2021. So, yeah, I'm just about done converting all of the PNGs to PDF, and the laptop stops working. Just in time. As I was contemplating the pros and cons of throwing my laptop through the window whilst reminding myself that, after Uncle Sam took his cut of my money, I am just way too broke to buy another one right now. So, I tried to actually solve the issue. How do I fix this, I thought. It was a low battery, so maybe connect it to the charger? Just to use my phone instead? I don't know, make a paper plane out of my answer sheet and shoot it in the direction of my professor's office? Or, just turn it off and then turn it back on again. I chose the last option because, well, it's the most known hack in all of technology. And sure enough, it worked. This trick has a lot of applications, apparently. In addition to saving your degree, turning things off and on has potentially saved even plane crashes. The Boeing 788 Dreamliner, an apparently state-of-the-art long-haul aircraft, actually needs its computers to be turned off manually every 51 days. Known more formally as power cycling, this supposedly simple thing is done to prevent stale data from overpopulating the plane's systems. Without power cycling, the plane's digital instruments may reflect misleading information, including faulty airspeed, altitude, and other critical info. For some aircraft, the screens can actually time out if the power is left connected for too long. Talk about the blue screen of death when you're 35,000 feet in the air. Now, while loss of certain data during a flight isn't necessarily the end of the world, the risk of a technical failure often needs to be qualified with which phase of the flight it takes place in. During the critical stages of a flight, such as takeoff or landing, such a failure could have catastrophic consequences. Turning the plane off and turning it on again, as it turns out, is quite common practice. And some of you might have experienced this power cycling before. Remember when you were waiting for the plane to taxi and suddenly all the lights and air conditioning went off for a second? That might as well be the maintenance staff or the crew turning it off and turning it back on again. 51 days. That's around 7 weeks, and a week has 7 days. But wait, why does a week have 7 days? And why are the weekends one after another instead of one other arrangement? Well, as it turns out, As with most of the original calendar inspiration, the 7 days of the week were inspired from the 7 planets thought to be part of the solar system at the time. As for the weekends, well, in 19th century Britain, the Sundays were reserved for religious practice only, which is of course how many still use it for today. However, people apparently relaxed a bit too much on Sunday, and not showing up for work on Monday became a real problem. It was then that factory owners decided that Saturday would be a half day as well, in a desperate bid to ensure productivity and give workers just a little extra time. Another idea is that, in the 1930s, some factories had to maximize productivity to avoid an economic crisis. Turns out, they did too good of a job, and they started producing surplus, which was a problem because that could actually lead to people without work, leading to, you guessed it, another economic crisis. So according to that theory, we have 2 weekends not because people weren't working well, but because they were working too well. With so many people these days working from home, 24/7 financial markets, and the larger landscape around office work looking to change for good, who knows what the idea of a weekend will be in the future? Only time will tell. Speaking of time, it has been quite a while since humans have been on this planet, and in that time, we have evolved to have larger brains, bipedality, mullets, and poor eyesight? Wait, where did the poor eyesight come from? You'd imagine that not being able to properly see a predator would be very bad for someone's chances of survival, and the genes that led to such faulty vision should have been removed from the gene pool through evolution, right? Well, why hasn't evolution taken care of it then? Of course, there is an age element to it, as with every ailment. Poor eyesight is way more common in the elderly, at which point they have fulfilled their evolutionary responsibilities and are no longer being selected for or against. But a sizable chunk of youth need corrective lenses too. Oh, by the way, when your mom told you watching too much TV caused your blurry vision, she was lying. Kind of. But yeah, back to evolution. So, really, why isn't evolution taking care of poor eyesight? Well, for one, our ancestors weren't really reading tiny fonts off of a screen, so farsightedness probably wasn't an issue. But even for short-sightedness, the condition was prevalent in some, but not all. So people just collaborated and looked out for each other. That's the theory anyways. Now, we have civilization in all its glory coming up with ways to restore perfect vision to more people than ever before. If you think of it, we are quite literally fighting evolution, and in doing so, preserving the genes of people with poor eyesight from dying out. If you're ever mad at having to wear glasses, well, you now have civilization to blame for it. Now you know. One thing that is improving with time, however, is our average lifespan. Or is it? You see, average lifespan and average life expectancy are 2 terms that are often used interchangeably. Are they really the same thing, though? Average life expectancy is how long someone is expected to live. This metric often takes into account the healthcare facilities in a country, mortality rates, causes of mortality, and so on, and is often used to compare a country's socioeconomic progress. Average lifespan, on the other hand, is really referring to something more like a shelf life metric. How long can you biologically last, basically. Now, the average life expectancy all over the world has been going up in general, and that's a great thing. We have more access to medication, comparatively safer methods of transport, more vaccines, and whatnot. However, we actually haven't increased our average lifespan all that much. Yes, people died really early back in the hunter-gatherer times. It was a brutal existence, after all. Life expectancy rose all the way from about 35 years to around 75. However, people that were able to escape famine, plagues, wars did live decently long. Healthcare was obviously not very good back then. What this shows, instead, is how far good genes can get you. In a 1994 study that looked at 397 Greeks and Romans that lived before and after 100 BC, about 100 of them died in battle, suicide, or other violent manners. For those that were able to survive through these things, though, the median age was actually 72. For those born after 100 BC, the median age was 66. History has many other examples of people living pretty long once they were able to escape the common causes of death at the time. Today, we haven't expanded the biological limits of life all that much. We've simply delayed the causes of death our ancestors had to deal with. But if you're suddenly uncertain about how long you're going to live, don't worry too much. Just count your heartbeat. Like, really. As silly as that sounds, the number of beats can be a surprisingly accurate indication for the lifespan of mammals. All mammals have a set number of beats, about 1 billion, and what determines how long they live is basically how fast they go through those beats, basically how fast their heart beats. On the far end of the scale is the Etruscan shrew, which has a resting heart rate of 835 beats per minute, which is well over 10 times that of humans. It's no surprise then that the Etruscan shrew only lives for about 2 years, despite being kinda cute. On the complete opposite end of the scale is the bowhead whale. It has a lifespan of around 200 years. It follows, then, that the bowhead whale has a heart rate of a measly 10 beats per minute. If you had a heart rate around that, you're already dead. Just kidding. You might have an extreme version of bradycardia, though. Now, I kinda lied when I said this would work for you. For whatever reason, us humans don't actually follow this rule. We have an extra billion beats to go through. And as you're going through them, maybe watch a movie, and then watch the trailer as well? Wait, why would you watch a movie and then watch its trailer? Actually, that's why they're called trailers. Trailers were originally shown after a movie, but that was seen to be ineffective in that audiences just left after the movie was finished. Today, trailers are known to us more as previews and are crucial components in ensuring a box office presence. But if you're not feeling like movies too much, maybe watch someone flip a coin? Contrary to popular belief, it's not actually 50-50 all the time. For a penny, for example, the head side is slightly heavier than the tail side. That means the center of gravity is tilted a bit towards the head side, and that side is therefore more likely to face down, giving you more tails than heads. So coin tosses aren't 50-50. But you know what is? The Haskell Free Library in Opera House. It's a Victorian building deliberately built on the US-Canada border between Derby Line, Vermont and Quebec. It actually has 2 separate addresses, one for America and the other for Canada. The front door to the building is on the US side, and the books are on the Canada side, and the reading rooms are considered international. The library has over 20,000 books, some of which are English and some of which are French. Something that is not French, however, is a croissant. What the? I know. But croissants are... I know. How can that be, right? Croissants are the most French thing there is. Well, croissants actually originated in Vienna, Austria. Over there, it was called a Kipfel. In fact, until as recent as the 19th century, the only way to get a croissant in France was from an Austrian bakery in Paris. So, I guess you've been lied to your entire life. We aren't living any longer than we used to. Coin tosses aren't 50-50. Trailers play after movies, and croissants aren't French. It really do be like that sometimes. Humans are a beautiful but weird species. As evolved as we are, we still struggle with the simplest things like chaos and chance. Our brains are constantly trying to recognize patterns to create meaning and order to things that oftentimes are just random. This quest to find patterns in things has led us to see the world in threes, the smallest number of occurrences it takes for something to become, at least to us, a pattern. When we see something the first time, it's an accident, a thing of chance. When we see it the second time, it becomes a coincidence, something to pause and think about, but not enough to make us stop in our tracks. When we see something for a third time, though, it becomes a pattern. Because our brains are designed to see the third occurrence as a pattern, the number 3 has become more significant to humanity than any other whole number. Omne trium perfectum. I find it quite poetic that it's 3 Latin words that describe the divinity that humans have given to the number 3. Translated to mean everything that comes in threes is perfect, it preaches that 3 is the number of completion, of perfection, of harmony. When you look around our world, it's hard to argue against this philosophy. The number 3 is everywhere and serves as an important purpose in almost every aspect of our lives. It cuts across religions, traditions, and philosophies. The best expression of this philosophy is in human life itself. One day we're born, one day we die, and we live the rest of our lives in between. 3. That life is also in 3 parts, or as we refer to it, 3 developmental stages: childhood, adolescence, and adulthood. In most parts of the world, We also spread out our school systems into these 3 stages. In childhood, it's primary education. When we become adolescents, it's secondary education. And when we're adults, it's tertiary education. You see, except in the phrase beginning, middle, and end, the number 3 does not signify the end. It signifies the completion of the necessary. Yes, you can break down the developmental stages of life further. You can split education into more stages. You can create more than 3. There would always be 4, 5, and 6. But at the end of the day, when all is said and done, when push comes to shove, 3 is the least amount of options we need to make it make sense, to make it feel rounded, to make it feel complete. Many religions around the world use the concept of 3s. In Hinduism, there's Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh. In Christianity, it's God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. In Greek mythology, it's Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. In Judaism, there are 3 patriarchs: Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I could go on and on and on, but I'm sure you get the point. These are all religions from all over the world, all ascribing a certain importance to the number 3, long before they ever interacted with one another. And it makes sense. Just look out into nature and you'll recognize 3s all around us. Look up into the sky and you'll see the sun, the moon, and the stars. Before we discovered fire, there were only 3 fundamental elements available to us: earth, sea, and air. We observe the world in 3 dimensions: length, width, and height. We can move left to right, forward to backward, and up and down. The objects we use every day, from the houses we live in to the vehicles we use for transportation, whether it's by land, sea, or air, all exist in these 3 dimensions: length, width, and height. Even the way we perceive time is in 3s: past, present, and future, beginning, middle, and end, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. It's no wonder that long before mathematics and physics were a thing, we could feel and understand the uniqueness of the number 3 in our world. It's for these reasons that people from all around the world, raised on different beliefs and traditions, all have that feeling deep inside their chests that the number 3 is just perfect. The point where everything comes full circle, where everything before was incomplete and everything after is simply an addition. Think about it. The triangle is the first shape with straight lines that can close off. If your goal was to close off the shape, every other line is simply extra. To make anything stand without it being a balancing act, you need a minimum of 3 legs. Yes, you could add 4, 5, or 6, but 3 is complete as it is. The number 3 is the first and only number that is the sum of its previous numbers. There's 1, there's 2, and then there's 3. A combination of 1 and 2. It just feels complete. 1 is the beginning, 2 is the middle, and 3 is the end. A combination of the 2 that came before. This attraction to the number 3 transcends religion, lore, and mysticism. It is also in the stories we tell, in the traditions we pass down to the next generation, in our fairy tales. There were 3 little pigs who had to deal with the big bad wolf. Goldilocks walked into the house of 3 bears and found 3 bowls of porridge, 3 chairs in the living room, and 3 beds in the bedroom. The 3 blind mice ran up the clock, the 3 little kittens lost their mittens, there were 3 musketeers, and genies always seemed to grant 3 wishes. 3s have been used in our stories for as long as we've been telling them, and it's not difficult to understand why. The number 3 is the perfect blend of brevity, rhythm, and meaning. It's often the smallest unit that can include a complete message, tell a complete story, teach a complete lesson. It's small enough to remember, but detailed enough to be impactful. Because of this, 3 has become a powerful tool in storytelling, and most people use it in speeches to make them powerful, insightful, and memorable. First, we give the speech a powerful title, like 3 Habits for a Successful Life. Then we divide the speech into 3 parts: introduction, body, and conclusion. Next, we use stories broken down into 3 acts, and sprinkle triads throughout our speeches to drive home the point even further. We say things like, to be successful in life, you must be disciplined, determined, and persistent. That sounded like a great idea, didn't it? It's the power of 3. Even in movies, the number 3 is important. from pre-production to production and then post-production. The number 3 guides the entire filmmaking process, far more than you might realize. When writing the story, the writers break it down into 3 parts: introduction, conflict, and resolution. When the movie goes into production, the director of photography uses the rule of thirds to make sure that each scene is framed correctly. They also need to make sure that the aperture, shutter speed, and ISO are nailed on so that they get the perfect exposure. The sound engineers aren't left out. They have to use the 3-to-1 rule to prevent phase issues when recording with multiple microphones. Then, once everything is perfect, the director yells, "Lights, camera, action," and on the 3rd shout, the actors start reciting their lines. When the director yells cut, everyone else's job is done. Except 3. In the video editing room, the impact of a shot is dependent on the shot that came before it, and affects the shot that comes right after it. 3. When producers and directors are talking about the movies they've just produced and trying to market it to the world, they fall back on the rules of 3s in their speeches. This movie is going to be impactful, insightful, and immersive. Once all is said and done, they go back to the studio to create 2 more movies, because everyone knows that all good movies come in trilogies. The Godfather, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, Back to the Future, Toy Story. And we all know that most television series go bad after their 3rd season. It's just the power of 3. The English language is a giant meme. It's been almost 3 years since I made that video, and I still find new things about the language that keep reaffirming that statement. You see, the English language is too complex for no reason. The truth is that all we really need to make a meaningful sentence is 3 words: subject, object, verb, in any order. I want water. Tree fell down. With the right context, you would be able to completely understand what I mean when I say these sentences. 2 words won't quite work, and 4 more words as well. Language just choosing to be complex for complexity's sake. However, even English cannot fight against the perfection of 3 completely. That's why adjectives have comparatives and superlatives, like big, bigger, and biggest. Let's take a moment to look away from the English language. Have you ever tried to subscribe for a service online only to be greeted by the famous 3-tiered pricing? Usually it'll say something like basic, advanced, and premium. If you have, did you pause to think, why are there almost always 3 options? Why not 2? Why not 4 or 5? Why 3? First, I think we can all agree that the reason there needs to be more than one offering is because we all don't have the same needs. So, by offering different options, these companies can satisfy the needs of multiple different customers at the same time. Second, people like the ability to choose. We all like to feel like we're making a decision when we buy something. So, the ability to choose, from something as simple as the color to the number of features we need, helps to give us that feeling of control that we desire. Third, 3 is the perfect number of options. Researchers from multiple universities discovered that having too many options affects our self-control. People who are faced with multiple different options often find it more difficult to stay focused, handle daily tasks, or even do something as simple as take their medicine. The researchers had a bunch of shoppers record how much decision-making they had to do while they were shopping throughout the day. When they were done shopping, the researchers then presented these people with simple math problems for them to solve. The researchers discovered that the more choices the shoppers had to make throughout their shopping spree, the worse they performed on the math problem. This might sound really scary considering how many choices we have to make throughout the day, but it only goes to show how important the number 3 is yet again. 3 acts as the perfect number, where we have just enough options to feel like we're actually making a choice, but not so much that we get decision fatigue. When you think about it, the importance of 3 only seems to become more glaring. In sports, the number 3 is everywhere. In basketball, a shot made from far out gets you 3 points. In soccer, a win in a match gets you 3 points. 3 goals get you a hat trick. And winning 3 trophies in one season, a treble, or in consecutive seasons, a three-peat, is considered one of the most prestigious things you can do. In professional wrestling, you pin your opponents on the count of 3. In fact, the triathlon is a sport which consists of 3 other sports. I can keep going on and on about 3s, the number that has its branches in almost every aspect of our lives. Its roots deep within our subconscious, its vines spread across languages, cultures, and walks of life. I could keep talking about the trees from the morning till afternoon, and then night, and I still won't be able to exhaust all the beauty, mystery, and harmony in that number. So next time you're out in the world, remember this: omne trium perfectum. Everything that comes in threes is perfect.
English is a difficult language. We park our cars on a driveway, but we drive cars on a parkway. When you transport something by car, it's called a shipment, but when you transport something by ship, it's called cargo. Piano players are called pianists, but race car drivers aren't called racists. The most popular sport played in North America is football, but there is no ball, and they use their hands, not their feet. We cook bacon, but we bake cookies. We have an alphabet with 26 letters, and it's always recited in the same way. But is there any reason that the alphabet has to be in that specific order? It can get really, really confusing. Nouns are things, like literally. They're an object, like a table or a car. They're people, they're places. Verbs are words that are used to describe actions. The girl ran down the road. The guy jumped into the pool. But alas, English comes in and just screws this entire thing up. Some words are both nouns and verbs at the same time, and can be used in the same sentence. Sometimes, you can create entire drawn-out sentences from a single word. The word police is an example. The police are, well, the police. Cops, you know. But police is also a verb, as in watching over or keeping in order. So, technically, police police, police police, police police, police police is a real sentence. So is buffalo buffalo, buffalo buffalo, buffalo buffalo, buffalo buffalo. I don't know. For some reason, we call it a building even though it's already been built. Words like that and had can be used back to back in sentences and still end up making sense in the end. I don't think that that makes any sense at all, but yet we still do it almost every day and barely even notice it. Two students, James and John, were taking an English test and had been asked to describe a man who had suffered from a cold in the past. John writes, "The man had a cold," while James writes, "The man had had a cold." In the end, John's answer was marked incorrect, while James's was marked correct. So, to summarize, James, while John had a better effect on the teacher. This is still the real sentence. It gets a lot easier to read when we add in punctuation and emphasis on some words, but still, just why? Some words are spelled the same and have multiple meanings, homonyms. Some of these can and can't rhyme at the same time. The word lead rhymes with read, but lead doesn't rhyme with red. Red rhymes with lead though. Did I just polish my car, or did I polish it? Using chemicals to remove the polish is pretty fine and standard, but use chemicals to remove the polish, and you might be Hitler. Does this shampoo mean no tears or no tears? The word bow can mean many things, like a bow and arrow, or a bow as in the bow on a Christmas gift, or the bow of a ship, or you could bow in front of someone. Some words look like they should rhyme, but just don't. This is the word bomb. Change the B to a T, and now it's tomb. Okay, let's try again. Change the first letter to a C, and now it's comb, which doesn't rhyme with either bomb or tomb. Alright, that's fine. Just change the C to an H, and we have home. Wait, that's not how you spell it. There, better. But wait, change the H to an S, and it becomes some, which doesn't rhyme with home. This is why English is confusing, especially for those people who are learning English as a second language. Letters don't always make the same sounds. Phonetics is the study of the way that words and letters sound. But funny enough, the word phonetics isn't even spelled phonetically. X usually makes a x sound, like in the words apex, relax, and tax. But sometimes, when placed by other letters, just causes it to make a completely different sound. Xylophone and xenophobic are two examples where the sound just completely switches to a Z, so why don't we just use a Z instead of X? C sometimes sounds like K, like in cat and can, but C also sometimes sounds like S, like in cigar or scent. Quick side note, the letter W is kinda weird too. In most books and fonts and web pages, it looks more like a double V than a double U, but I guess it all depends on how you write it. The letters G and H and P and H, when put together, end up making an F sound. But even still, the ending OUGH is one of the most confusing ones in the entire language. Take these words: cough, rough, bow, through, and though. All of these words end in OUGH, but somehow none of them rhyme with each other, but pony and baloney do. It just doesn't make sense. You see this abomination of a word? Just take a guess on how to pronounce it. Since some of our letters make multiple sounds, and when put together with other letters sound like other letters, you can spell words in ways that they just shouldn't be. Use the GH sound in tough, the O sound from women, and the TI sound from nation, and you get the word fish. If you take the W in answer, the H in ghost, the extra A in aardvark, and the T in listen, you get the word what. Nobody would hear it though, because all of those letters are silent. One of the dumbest things about English is how we use silent letters. Letters that otherwise make a sound sometimes decide they just don't want to show up. This is a B. This is also a B. This is a very long Q. This is also a very long Q. This is a blue eye. So is this. The S in island, the P in psychology, the H in honest, the O in possum. What's even the point of silent letters? They're only good for tricking spelling bee contestants who are given words that they've literally never seen before or will ever use again. Believe it or not, every single letter in the English alphabet is silent sometimes. Sometimes we get lazy and we don't want to say multiple words. So instead, we use contractions. We put in an apostrophe and just completely get rid of half the letters in some words. I am going to has since turned into I'ma. It's informal, but we cut out 3 spaces and 75% of the letters, and yet we still all understand it. Have not is shortened to haven't, did not turns into didn't, they are is shortened to there. But we have multiple theirs. There's there, and there, all of which are used in their own different situations, but we'll get there later. There's plenty of people who don't know what the difference between your and your is, but hopefully you're not one of them. We kinda took this too far though, and made triple contractions. We've started slurring our words so badly that we ended up with things like Yaldov and Yudanov. But to be honest, sometimes these contractions don't even make much sense once you expand them. Take this question for example. Why won't she come to my birthday party? When you expand the contraction, it becomes, why will not she come to my birthday party? I don't know. Some words have multiple meanings, which is fine. But what isn't fine is when they're completely opposite of each other. Contronyms. For example, off. Here, the light just got turned off, as in deactivated. But when my alarm goes off in the morning, it turns on, or is activated. The word screen is also a contronym. You can use a hat to screen your face from the sun, as in to conceal or protect it. But movie theaters tend to screen new movies when they come out, as in to show or display. Commas are also very important. They can be used to bridge 2 sentences into one, or separate items in a list. But there's a gray area here as to when you should or shouldn't use them. The Oxford comma is one of the most debated things in the English language. Simply put, it's the last comma used in a sentence with 3 or more items. But for some reason, a lot of people choose just not to use it. Most people don't even know that they're doing anything wrong. Here's an example. I love my parents, John and Lisa. This is a normal sentence, right? You can tell that there's at least 3 different people here and there's no confusion. Now, without the Oxford comma. I love my parents, John and Lisa. Here it gets kinda confusing. Are your parents' names John and Lisa, or are John and Lisa other people? It just causes unnecessary confusion, even for people who are native speakers. For people learning English as a second language, it makes things 1,000 times more difficult because it's so inconsistent across the world. Some places use them, other places don't. The masculine pronouns in English are he, his, and him, so you might imagine that the feminine ones are she, shiz, and shim. But they aren't. Instead, we change it to she, hers, and her. In English, you might notice that we often change things up just for the sake of being difficult.
Ananas,
ananas,
ananas, ananas.
pineapple,
But pineapples have no pine, nor are they an apple. Some numbers make sense, like 60, 70, and 80. But at the same time, we have numbers that don't make sense, like 20, 30, and 40, which don't match. We say in November, but we say on Friday. So yeah, it's pretty clear that English is broken. But you know, at the end of the day, it's what it's.
In life, anything is possible. Because we can never fully understand how the world works, and the laws of physics prevent us from being able to tell the future, everything we predict is a probability. Some are a lot more probable, others are less probable, while some have astronomically low chances of ever happening. The probability is vanishingly small, but it remains non-zero. Would you get hit by a car? Will you get struck by lightning? Will we ever achieve world peace? If there is a chance that anything can happen, what are the odds? I was scrolling through the deepest parts of the internet one day when I came across this man, Roy Cleveland Sullivan, the man who has been hit by lightning 7 times in his lifetime. The odds of getting struck by lightning once isn't that low, it's just about 1 in 15,000. Even if you live in a small town, chances are that somebody in that town has been struck by lightning at least once. The odds of being struck 7 times in a period of 80 years? That's a 1 in 10 to the 28 chance. This seems like such incredible and unfortunate odds, until you consider the fact that you're more likely to get struck by lightning 7 times than you are to shuffle a deck of cards into perfect numerical order. Those odds? 1 in 10 to the 68. Probability is something that we can't really comprehend as humans. If we did, we'd stop worrying about a lot of things and stop taking granted for most of the things we should be worried about. Like sharks. No thanks to the movie Jaws, humans now have an immense fear of sharks. But the reality is, you're more likely to get killed by a vending machine than you are to get killed by a shark. The odds of getting killed by a vending machine are 1 in 112 million, while the odds of getting killed by a shark are a staggering 1 in 250 million. Now, the odds that you'll be attacked by a shark are much lower at 1 in 3.7 million, but even that is still too high for the monsters we've branded sharks to be. For context, you're more likely to get killed by a dog at a 1 in 112,400 chance than you are to get killed by a shark, but we still keep them in our homes as loving pets. You're more likely to get killed by hornets, wasps, or bees at 1 in 63,225 than you are to get killed by a shark. In fact, you're more likely going to get killed by the government for committing murder at 1 in 119,000 than you are of getting killed by a shark. When you put a little thought into it, you realize that most of the time, our fears are sensational and not rational. When something tragic happens and it garners a lot of public attention, we are more likely to be afraid of that thing, even if it is much less common than the less notorious things. The most prominent example of this is the way we treat plane crashes. Now yes, when planes do crash, it is tragic. But because they cause such a big spectacle and have lots of media coverage, we forget that it is still by far the safest way to travel. Passenger airplane incidents are very rare, and your odds of dying in a plane crash are very slim at 1 in 205,000. That's incredibly low when you compare it to your odds of dying in a car accident, which is just 1 in 107. For motorcycle riders, it's 1 in 890. And even pedestrians aren't safe at 1 in 541. But wait, maybe the reason the airplane deaths are so low has to do something with our fear. Before people go on an airplane, they usually prepare well in advance. No harmful objects are allowed on board, and there's always usually more than one designated pilot who has trained for years on safety practices before they were ever allowed to fly a plane. Compare that to road travel, where we don't really think that much about it, and you can maybe see why things are the way they are. And with the odds that you'll be involved in a drunk driving accident in your lifetime being incredibly high at 2 in 3, you can see what I mean. We barely give it any thought. Hopefully, we can all do better. Try to reduce the risk by simply designating a driver beforehand or taking an Uber when you go out for fun. Another thing we should be worried about is right-handed appliances. Yes, it's true that most of the world is right-handed, for some reason. But if we're learning anything as a species, it's inclusiveness. We must do the same with dominant hands because, as it is, the odds of a left-handed person dying simply because they used a right-handed appliance wrong is 1 in 7 million. And while the chances look ridiculously slim, it has to happen to somebody. If you don't die, hey, you'll get a lot of free money from that lawsuit. The ambidextrous people among us can help us decide what appliances are better suited for what dominant hand. and we have a surprising amount of them, 1 in 100 to be exact. Now, this does not include people who have had to learn how to use their non-dominant hand because of injury or out of curiosity. It's just people who are born with an amazing control of both of their hands. Art is very subjective. What some people might find beautiful, others will find ugly. What one might consider great acting, others might see it as over the top and annoying. You see, much unlike science, art doesn't have a definitive set of rules, and so they don't have a strict guideline for judgment either. And while this allows for creativity, it also makes it very difficult to find success in the world of the arts. If you want to be a surgeon, for instance, you know that if you pass the med school exams, in turn go through residency, and so forth, you'll make it. You have a set path to follow. But if you want to be a supermodel or a rock star or a YouTuber, it's not that straightforward. You have to work hard at it every single day, and even then, your odds are very slim. You can be a theater kid all your life, go to film school, practice as much as possible. But in the end, the odds that you'll become a movie star aren't very encouraging, at just 1 in 1.1 million. It's amazing so that even with the odds as slim as this, every year, thousands of people will travel from all parts of the world to LA trying to fulfill their dreams of being on the big screen. When interestingly, you have a much better chance of winning an Oscar at just 1 in 11,500 than becoming a movie star. But of course, this Oscar includes all the technical awards that are given when everyone is taking a bathroom break. And most people would much rather take a 1 in 1.1 million chance than to receive an award when no one's watching. If you're a writer, however, the odds are slightly in your favor. There is a 1 in 220 chance that you'll write a New York Times bestseller. If you put in the time and the effort necessary, these odds are definitely going to go up, bringing you that inch closer to making your dream a reality. Sports are closer related to science than arts, because most of the time, if you work at it hard enough, you'll achieve some kind of success. But how hard can you work when there's only so many medals to go around? Millions of people around the world dedicate their entire lives to competing in the Olympics, yet only 1 in 662,000 will ever win a medal. And that's the thing about scarcity. When there's such limited space, the odds of ever being able to do or acquire said thing just gets increasingly thinner. Think about the number of children who have worn a spacesuit and helmet to career day in school and told everybody that they want to be astronauts. Now think about the fact that the odds of becoming an astronaut are 1 in 12.1 million, and you get sad for those little kids whose dreams will one day have to be crushed. What if they wanted to be president? Well, the chance of becoming a US president is 1 in 10 million. Unless you're a religious 6-foot-tall Harvard Law graduate and military veteran. Then your odds go up astronomically, especially if you're a Harvard alumni, because as surprising as it might sound, the odds that the President of America has attended Harvard is 1 in 3.58. So if you want to have the best chance at becoming president, you know what school to apply for. However, getting into Harvard is almost as difficult as becoming president when you're done. With a chance of just 4.6% of getting in, you might want to apply to some backup schools as well. At the end of the day, we all just want to be successful. Whether it's through the arts, or going through the so-called traditional route of finishing college and getting a good job. We all just want to have enough money to live comfortably while we're still young. But sadly, the odds are stacked against us. There's a slim chance of just between 6.4% and 22.3% that you'll become a millionaire, with different factors like race, education, wealth status, and age helping to place you somewhere in that range. While the chance of becoming a billionaire? Well, there's 8 billion humans in the world, and only around 2,000 billionaires, so basically, non-existent. Getting old has a bittersweet taste to it. On the one hand, you're getting wiser, more mature, and you have a much better understanding of the world than you did when you were younger. But on the other hand, you're also getting weaker, you're forgetting things more. And sadly, your body just keeps breaking down, one after the other, and the stats don't really help at all. If you're under 20 right now, there's a 1 in 4 chance that you'll be disabled before you retire. And it gets worse. There's a 1 in 2 chance that at the age of 75, you'll have disabling hearing loss. This is why whenever people say they want to work hard now so they can enjoy their retirement, I kind of feel bad for them. Because most times, at that age, you don't really get to enjoy anything. All you can really do is sit around and reminisce on a life that once was, and when the Grim Reaper comes, you say goodbye to your loved ones and move on. And that's why you should do everything you want to do right now. For some reason, there's a 7% higher chance that you'll die on your birthday than on any other day, going out together with the candles. But for a few of us, living to 100 is possible, with the odds of that happening being approximately 1 in 5,780, with those odds increasing significantly if you're biologically a woman. On the other hand of the spectrum, one of the most incredible human achievements is being born. If you're here watching this video right now, you deserve a round of applause. You ran, you fought, you survived. And against all odds, you made it. The odds of you existing were 1 in 5.5 trillion. But here you are. You might have been the 1 in 20 chance of being born on your mom's exact due date, or you're like most of us who were born around 2 weeks before or after. You might be the 1 in 250 who are geniuses, burdened with the weight of advancing our civilization, or like the rest of us who are cheering them on. Whoever you are, whatever it took you to get here, that was an incredible feat, one that is unrepeatable. Not in this lifetime, at least. You wake up in the morning, head outside, and you say good morning to your next door neighbor. You walk down the street and you see a familiar face, so you nod to them to let them know that you acknowledge them. You get into a bus and an old lady walks in behind you, so you stand up and let her take your seat. You're not compelled to do any of these things. There are no moral handbooks or guides that give us a checklist of the world's do's and don'ts. It's not in any constitution or any written rulebook. But somehow, we all know these rules. We strictly abide by them. We don't tell each other what they are, but we all know when someone breaks them. These are the unspoken rules of society. Aristotle once said, "Man is by nature a social animal. An individual who is unsocial naturally and not accidentally is either beneath our notice or more than human." Because we're such social animals, we depend on one another for everything, including sometimes determining what is right and what's wrong. We come together to make seats of government, appoint leaders to keep things in check, and we write ourselves a constitution. But that's for the big stuff. For the little things that we are more likely to face every day, there are no rules or constitutional demands, just a common understanding among all of us on what is right and what is wrong. But we don't always get it right. As a society, we love to look at pictures. It reminds us of a time that once was. It makes us feel nostalgic. And when we share these pictures with people, it gives them a sneak peek into our lives, where we were, how far we've come, and all the things we've been through along the way. Before smartphones, we'd all keep large family photo albums in our house for when a guest comes over, and occasionally, as they sat, we'd hand it over to them and bond over the memories of the past. Now we still do that today, just in a different way. We often send pictures to one another from our smartphones, post throwback photos on social media, and simply just hand our phones to people to see a certain picture. But then, they start swiping left or right to see more pictures, so we get angry. But why? Because they've just broken an unspoken rule. Don't swipe left or right if someone shows you a photo on their phone, unless they tell you it's okay to do so. Because unlike our family photo albums that are carefully curated to show the pictures we're comfortable with others seeing, our phones have everything, from funny memes we want to share, to private photos that should never be seen by anyone else. This is why it's important to restrict yourself to as much information as the other person is willing to share. It's amazing when you think about it, but smartphones are a very recent invention. The very first commercial smartphone was released around 30 years ago, but it wasn't until 2007, with the release of the iPhone, that phones truly became smart by modern standards. And in such a short period of time, as a society, we've been able to create unspoken rules around using the smartphone that somehow we all just seem to follow. Before phones were invented, we always had to visit each other unannounced, but since phones came around and texting became a thing, we created a new unspoken rule. You don't normally go to people's houses without texting or calling them to let them know. Of course, this often exempts family members and very close friends, but if you just want to stop by the house of your coworker or someone you're not really close to, you should probably send them a text first, or you won't be greeted by a smiling face when you ring the doorbell. As humans, we communicate not with just our words, but also with our actions. In fact, as the saying goes, actions speak louder than words. When we speak to each other, we're watching for hand gestures, hand movements, proximity, we're watching for body language. Oftentimes, this helps us know exactly how we're doing in a conversation. Does the person seem interested? Do they look confused? All of that. This is why it's considered rude to look down at your phone screen when someone's talking to you, even if you're listening to them with utmost concentration. People want to be able to look you in the eyes when they're talking to you. In the same vein, it's also considered rude to leave your earbuds in your ear while you're talking to people. This has become even more important since wireless earbuds became a thing. Because they're so tiny and comfortable, it's easy to leave them in your ears, even when you're talking to people. But as a society, we've come together to say that it's much more respectful to take the earbuds out so people don't think they have to shout at you to hear them. People on public transport often have no respect for personal space. And honestly, most times it's not really their fault. There's just very little room for everyone to share. We've learned to understand these things. But still, there are boundaries you must not cross. No matter how close you have to be to someone else, just don't look at their phone. Like I already alluded to earlier, phones usually contain really private and sensitive information, some of which you really might not want to see, and peeping into someone else's phone is a sure way to witness the unforgettable. Speaking of smartphones in public transportation, there is one unspoken rule I wish more people would follow. Don't play music out of your speakers in a small public place, like in a waiting room or on a bus. No matter how amazing you think that song is, not everyone's gonna like it. And even if everyone does, some people might have just had a rough day and just want to sit in silence to take a break and recollect their thoughts. We should give them the opportunity to do this. If you want to listen to music on your commute, get a pair of wireless earbuds. They're pretty cheap. Similarly, don't take personal calls in public is another really popular unspoken rule. Unless it's an emergency, no one really wants to hear the conversation you're having with your long-lost second cousin or all the office gossip your coworker is giving you. And if you must take the call, it's best you find somewhere even moderately private or reduce your voice to the bare minimum to avoid getting dirty looks from the people around you. When someone whispers something to you, it's an unspoken rule to whisper or reply back to them, because more often than not, they're whispering because they don't want anyone else hearing in on your conversation. As humans, we tell a lot of lies. Sometimes we lie to make ourselves feel better, sometimes we lie to protect other people's feelings, sometimes we lie to impress people, sometimes to fit better in certain social spaces, and sometimes we just want to get some time off work. Whatever the reason might be for you, the truth is we lie a lot. And for the most part, we've accepted this as a society. However, as a rule, there are two people you never lie to, your doctor and your lawyer. Thankfully, these two people are also required by law to take your truths to the grave, so you don't have to worry about your secrets getting exposed. To prevent people from lying unnecessarily just to save face, there are also some questions we just don't ask. You normally never ask how much they earn, how much they weigh, and you never ask a woman her age. Why that is, I'm still not so sure. If you're close enough to people, you'll most likely know all of these details without asking. And if you're not close enough to them to know, then you're not close enough to be asking either. It's important to say it again that humans are very social animals. This means that we thrive in groups. As a result, we have learned to be kind to one another. It creates a sense of camaraderie and helps us build and strengthen our communities. So, to make it easier for everyone, we created unspoken rules to help us determine what is kind, what is nice, and what is not. If you had an arrangement to meet up with someone, and for some reason you had to cancel, it's your job to reschedule. When you do this, you let the person know that you value their time, and you're willing to make things right for not fulfilling your end of the bargain previously. If someone offers to share food with you, they get to have the first and the last pieces. And if they have just one piece left, it's only courteous that you don't ask them for that thing at all. Being kind doesn't always mean cheering people on. Sometimes, it's pointing out flaws and helping to fix them whenever we can. However, as an unspoken rule, you should only point out flaws that can be fixed in 30 seconds or less. You're having lunch with your friend and there's something on his teeth. Tell him. Your girlfriend's shirt got untucked in the back. Let her know. But things like her makeup or his poor combination of clothes, there's no need to point it out if they can't immediately do anything about it. You'll only make them insecure and self-conscious. There are two places you should never make fuss or start drama: a wedding and at a funeral. Weddings are really special and sacred to most people and in most cultures around the world, so ruining one is heavily frowned upon in our society. Don't try to propose at someone else's wedding, please, unless they offer. Do not ask them, because then you put them in a weird position where it's difficult for them to say no, especially if you're close friends. Don't make their lives harder than they need to be. At funerals, you should have respect for the dead. Let people pay their final respects to their deceased loved ones. You can meet the living relatives much later to demand whatever it is they owe. As children, we didn't really see any of these unspoken rules because not much was expected of us at the time. Yes, we might have been taught to be kind to strangers and respectful to our elders, but generally, we were also easily forgiven if we ever broke any unspoken rule. But it's not the same for adults. In fact, the older we get, the more rules get added to what we already have to follow. As a child, leaving a shopping cart in the middle of the grocery aisle could be considered cute, but as an adult, you won't be forgiven so easily. As you get older, people will also be less keen to borrow your things. They bought their stuff with their own money and they expect you to do the same. So as a general unspoken rule, you never borrow stuff more than twice. If you're borrowing it for a third time, then you clearly need one of your own. When you start living on your own, you have to get important things like your furniture, kitchen utensils, and bathroom appliances. However, one thing you must never forget is a plunger. And this is one of the only unspoken rules that's for personal benefit alone. You should always buy a plunger before you need a plunger. On your first day at a new job, you're usually told how things work at the organization. You're given a set of duties and responsibilities, and you're educated on the culture of that office. Things you're allowed to do, and things you're not allowed to do. However, there are a few things they don't include in the orientation speech, like don't cook fish or anything that has the potential to smell terrible in the office kitchen. Be kind to the less skilled staff, like the janitors and security guards, and wait until everyone has gotten off the elevator before you get on. It's rules like these that bind us together as a society. If everyone and everything was put in a constitution, we would be living like robots. But I mean, we basically already are. By leaving many of these rules unspoken, we're able to follow them more naturally, because some things are better left unsaid.
Here we go again.
On the 1st of September 1939, Germany invaded Poland from the east, starting World War II. As you would expect, there was fear and panic throughout Europe. So, to calm the British population down and to prevent widespread panic, the War Ministry released a poster encouraging citizens to keep calm and carry on. In the year 2000, more than 60 years after the poster was released, one of the original versions was discovered, and thanks to its simple design and now satirical sounding message, it was memeified, spread all across the internet as a message of irony to keep calm and carry on, even in the face of a life-threatening situation. The Nazis are about to blow up London, keep calm and carry on. World War III is about to break out on top of dealing with Corona, keep calm and carry on. The message was simple, funny, and a lighthearted way to express deep-seated concern for the situation we collectively found ourselves in. This is a meme. It has the power to express the collective emotions, feelings, and thoughts of people, and often as a coping mechanism for something that would have otherwise been rather sad. Memes, we all know them. They make us laugh, cry, think, smile, but we just can't quite explain exactly what they are. Are they just funny pictures with text? Or perhaps jokes that we turn into running gags? What exactly are memes, and how have they taken the world by storm? The word meme is a term that was originally coined by evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins in his 1976 book, The Selfish Gene. Derived from the Greek word mimina, which means imitated, Dawkins described a meme as a unit of cultural information that's spread by imitation, the cultural equivalent of a gene. Tunes, catchphrases, ideas, ways of building arches and making pots, clothes, and fashion were all described by Dawkins as memes propagating themselves in the meme pool by moving from brain to brain through a process that can loosely be described as imitation. Today, the word meme might mean something else in the dictionary, but its use still closely resembles the idea that Dawkins expressed in his work. A meme is considered good when the message in it is concise and relatable, easy to catch on and pass from person to person. When it talks about a shared experience within a group of people, when it says a lot without saying too much. Or when you just take a JPEG and throw it in a deep fryer, those are also good. Memes are so powerful because, as humans, we understand pictures more than words. Before we could write, we could draw. This is why it's no surprise that a relatable image will pass a message across much faster than, say, a long Twitter thread. Memes are so powerful because they are seemingly harmless, humorous fun. Because of this, they allow us to express our views about the world and the things that are happening around us without starting some serious debate. The year 2021 was a rather difficult year for a lot of people, not for the same reasons as 2020, but because of hope killed. In 2020, we were told that the pandemic would only last for a few weeks if we all stayed inside and social distanced. We did, and yet a year later, we were still inside. So, at the beginning of 2021, the meme, "When COVID is over," was created. In it, people describe the experience of waiting for something that might never happen, using metaphors of everyday experiences like, "When COVID is over" is starting to sound like "when I'm all caught up on laundry." Or pop culture references like, "When COVID is over" is starting to sound like "when One Direction comes back." All of which are never happening. On the surface of it, these memes are funny, relatable, and interesting expressions of the situation we're going through. But these memes carry a sense of hopelessness underneath them. And that's another thing that makes memes so powerful. They're baked with emotion. From Keanu Reeves sitting on a bench to a horse standing on the beach, memes can be used to express every form of emotion. From surprise to disappointment, excitement, skepticism, disgust, anger. Memes help us express things that we might not be able to find the right words to explain. They convey our expressions, desires, our deepest, darkest pains, in a lighthearted and humorous way that many have turned into a coping mechanism. A simple Google search and you'll find a meme for every bad situation you're going through. From memes that only old people use like Disaster Girl or Grumpy Cats, to stuff like whatever this is. There is always an appropriate meme that describes your feelings and whatever situation you're going through at that point. Now,
I'll let you finish.
On how memes are the best thing in the world since sliced bread. But first, there are some things that are not so great about memes and the way we've pretty much turned everything into a meme. Memes are fast food media. Just like fast food, they're disgustingly delicious when you take a bite. They're funny and witty and give you bite-sized information of everything that's going on around you. However, they lack any real nourishment. All you're seeing are headlines and witty remarks about what's going on, without fully understanding the depth of the issues. On the 3rd of January 2020, Qasem Soleimani, an Iranian major general, was assassinated by the United States on the order of President Donald Trump. Iran's leader, President Hassan Rouhani, made a statement afterwards saying, "Iran and the other free nations of the region will take revenge for this gruesome crime from criminal America." To which Trump then replied, "Iran never won a war, but never lost a negotiation." And immediately, the internet erupted with memes about World War III. For almost a week, there was an endless supply of witty remarks and bite-sized nuggets about what our lives would look like if there was another world war. Here we are in February 2022, and yet again, the World War III memes are returning. However, a lot of people who joined in the memes did not understand why they were being created in the first place, and what purpose they served. People looked at those memes and felt that they knew enough about the issue, without bothering to find out what had just happened and the true repercussions of the actions of the US government, if any. They binged on the fast food, without taking the time to eat a proper meal in the form of a full news article on the subject, which, even then, are rarely full of all the true information. Memes can also be a tool of misinformation. It's easiest to tell a person a lie when they're feeling good and vulnerable, which is why it's so easy to propagate lies and misinformation through memes. Memes are more powerful than we give them credit for. Laugh through 1, 2, 3 memes on a subject, and before you know it, you've unconsciously accepted some of the ideas that the memes present. Netflix and chill first started out as a meme, but today it's a cultural phenomenon that describes, unironically, something completely different than it did before the meme existed. This is one of the many times when a meme transcends the internet and becomes a truly cultural phenomenon. Netflix and chill is, well, chill. But there are some other memes that have become stereotypical tools, used offensively to describe an activity or a person, but aren't seen as negative as regular stereotypes because they're memes. Take the Nigerian prince meme, for example. It labels an entire country as a bunch of fraudsters. If the memes have taught us anything, It's that labels like this can completely transform how people view and relate with the people of a particular nationality. When Trump called it the Chinese virus, people of East Asian descent began getting attacked for something they really knew nothing about. Chinese restaurants all over the country were affected, with many having to close down. Even the beer Corona was abandoned on shelves for a long time at the beginning of the pandemic just because of its name. So we see and understand the dangers of a single story, but yet with the Nigerian prince, we let it slide because it's a funny meme. It looks relatively harmless, but yet there are millions of people who will never work with Nigerians because they believe they're inherently fraudsters. The truth is that memes, just like every other joke, are embedded in cultural context. It's derived by our views and thoughts about the world, some of which might be problematic. However, unlike with a joke that's tied to the comedian, memes spread so quickly and have such a far-reaching impact that it's often difficult to know who to hold accountable, or whether it's possible to even do so in the first place. The YouTube channel BuzzFeed has an entire section of videos of people who have accidentally become memes. And while many of the people in these videos claim to be happy with their memification, there are many other people out there whose pictures have been turned into memes that they're not happy about. But sadly, there's nothing they can do about it. Memes often capture you when you're least flattering, whether it's Keanu Reeves sitting on a bench sad, or the kindergarten boy who couldn't get his words together, or the thousands of people whose pictures or videos of emotional breakdowns have been turned into memes. How would you feel if your least flattering picture was turned into a meme, immortalized forever on the internet? It's a sad reality that if the internet deems your photo meme-worthy, you have no say on how far the picture travels and whether or not it ever stops traveling. Think about people with body dysmorphia issues, fear of judgment, and a lack of self-esteem. Think about the pictures we'll never see and the emotions that will never be expressed, for the fear of being turned into a meme. If you don't agree with anything I've said so far, a simple meme like ratioed or okay boomer can be used to end the argument, which I guess is good for damage control, but is yet another problem with memes. In a bid to be the funniest person in the discussion, we often don't listen to the other party, and instead just try to get the last laugh. Once someone says something we don't agree with, or we don't feel like arguing, we quickly hit them with a meme and just move on without acknowledging their point or even trying to understand it. So we don't learn anything new, and we just keep holding on to our ideas and beliefs, at least until another meme rolls around that we can use to start or end another argument. The truth is, memes are both good and bad, and understanding the two sides of the coin is important in making progress. There have been some incredible achievements and great examples of community building through memes. This is just one of the many beautiful things that memes have given us. In 2010, a Japanese kindergarten teacher uploaded a picture of her 2-year-old Shiba Inu with a peculiarly round, emotionless face. 12 years later, and that one picture has given us many memes, created an entirely new genre of entertainment with pets speaking broken English, and even created 2 cryptocurrencies, Dogecoin and Shiba Inu, that, at their peak, were combined both worth a total of nearly $100 billion. $100 billion, all from a meme. When you sit back and really look at it, the power of a single meme is so incredible and far-reaching. It has the ability to make you feel part of a collective, yet still uniquely individual. But I'ma head out. The adipose tissue in your female parent is so abundant that when she dons elevated footwear, she is able to unearth reserves of petroleum. In other words, your mom is so fat that when she wears high heels, she strikes oil. And not to offend you or anything, but a yo mama joke is almost certain to crack people up. If you're like 7. It doesn't matter what language you speak, chances are some of the most popular slurs in your language have something to do with mothers, and it might surprise you how old this tradition of the maternal insult really is. According to some estimates, the oldest yo mama joke equivalent is 3,500 years old. Of course, unlike now, instead of awkward laughter, people who made those jokes got guillotined in return. Shakespeare, it turns out, also was quite the jokester. In the second scene of the 4th act in his play, Titus Andronicus, He writes, "Villain, what hast thou done? That which thou canst not undo. Villain, I have done thy mother." But really, why? Why does so much cursing revolve around people's mothers? It's clearly not limited to English or Latin scripts, or any one culture for that matter. The ability of a maternal cuss to be deeply insulting is almost universal. Where does it get this power from? Well, some say it stems from the fact that filial piety, or the attitude of respect towards your parents, is as universal a value as it gets, and anything that encroaches on that sacred bond is immediately considered crossing the line. Even in the realm of combat sports, which essentially markets itself based on how well its athletes can insult each other at press conferences, commenting on someone's mom is still a no-go. Take the recent press conference between Canelo Alvarez and Caleb Plant, for example. The fighters quickly went from posing to pictures to swinging at each other, eventually having to be separated. In the aftermath, Canelo, who is usually not the type to get into these things outside the ring, said, "We say nasty things to each other. Who cares? But he did something that crossed the line. He talked about my mom." Many have theorized what causes such a reaction across different cultures. It seems quite sneaky to insult a loved one instead of the person right in front of them, because you can maybe swallow an insult or just laugh it off. But if it's not even at you, you are almost left powerless. Unless, of course, you choose to react physically, at which point, the insult has already done its job. I mean, to be fair, they do refer to you as the son of a something. But wait, even that makes no sense. For one, everyone loves dogs. Mostly. But if you are the son of a female dog, which is the same exact animal, it's bad. And yet when you meet a really nice friend, they are your dog? Like, what the Freud? Which brings me to one of the more interesting theories that has got to do with a maternal insult. It was by Sigmund Freud and his theory about psychoanalysis. More specifically, it pertains to Freud's Oedipus complex, a stage of the psychological development of a child, where the child wishes for the undivided attention of the parent of the opposite sex. According to Freud, this subconscious desire remains hidden in the depths of our psyche even as we grow older. It is this desire for undivided attention that gets violated when people, usually men, insult each other's mothers. But isn't it also so strange that a remark that is considered so outrageously insulting in one domain can, in an instant, be turned into a more jocular way of addressing each other? That tends to be the case with swear words. Context is key. Who and where it is said, and in what tone it is said in, can be the difference between a mischievous giggle or a punch in the jaw. Of course, it probably doesn't feel very good to be on the wrong end of a yo mama joke, whether it was by a friend or a foe, but you get the point. And it applies to other, more general swear words as well. If anything, the tendency to target your slurs at some socially sacred bond is a testament to how dynamic a linguistic device like swear words can be. For example, the F-bomb is a noun, pronoun, adjective, adverb, verb, and everything else it can grammatically be all at the same time. It can be used to soothe, enrage, or simply state something. With just slight changes in the tonality of the word, it can mean so many different things. This probably goes against the grain of conventional wisdom regarding swear words, and that they're just considered lazy vocabulary or the drunk person's English, or that people that use a lot of swear words are considered illiterate or less educated. There's plenty of arguments. However, research by Timothy J., a professor emeritus of linguistics at Massachusetts College of Liberal Arts, has shown that contrary to popular belief, people that can swear a lot also tend to have richer vocabularies. Participants were asked to name every non-swear word that they could think of using the letters F, A, and S, and then later were asked to do the same thing, but with swear words. It was seen that people who could name a lot of curses were also able to name a lot of other words with those letters in general, suggesting their increased usage of swear words was not motivated by a lack of relevant vocabulary. This is also where the now internet famous idea, people who swear a lot are more intelligent, came from. Unfortunately, the link is not that clear. Having a richer general vocabulary is obviously associated with a better command over language, and that, by extension, is associated with a higher intelligence generally. But the evidence on that one is certainly not concrete. One thing's for certain, however. If you curse a lot, it's not because you're stupid. Your mom, however, is. Back to more general swear words. So apparently, there is a template for the quintessential swear word in English. It's 4 letters on average, and is a closed syllable word, meaning it ends with a consonant, not a vowel. PP, as a result, doesn't qualify as a swear word, and even if it does, it's not a catchy one. Then there is the property of being sound symbolic. This pertains to words that sound like they mean. Swear words, perhaps by association, often carry an aggressive and harsh sound in congruence with their meanings. Children are more likely to learn these words at a young age, and remember them, which is unfortunate, but might as well explain why swear words are often at the tip of our tongues. The word suave, for example, is a 14th century swear. I can say it without bleeping it because nobody really knows what it means. I'll let you Google the meaning, but one of the reasons why you and I don't give each other a good suave every once in a while is that it lacks sound symbolism, meaning it doesn't really sound like a curse word. But the understanding of that is a bit iffy. Do the traditional swear words sound bad because there's something intrinsically unique about their phonetics, or is it simply a case of long-term association? However, the words which did survive are now part and parcel of our daily vernaculars. It's almost odd at how prevalent they are while simultaneously being so taboo. Everyone uses them, everyone knows what they mean, and yet, everyone still frowns at you when you use them publicly. Also, nobody tells you which words you're not supposed to say before you've said them, which kinda defeats the purpose, but whatever. It makes you wonder why curses were created in the first place. Well, it turns out, swear words can offer an evolutionary advantage by preventing more physical and potentially more life-threatening altercations between people. If you can just flip people off without literally flipping people off, you could probably reduce your chances of exchanging blows with that person. It is no wonder then that swearing helps you de-stress. It might seem counterintuitive considering swearing might be considered hurtful speech in some contexts, but often it is the lesser of the two evils. If indeed swearing was invented as simply a form of release, it would explain why censoring can actually end up making these words more powerful. Think about it. The more censored a word is, the more mischievous it is to swear, and the greater the exclusivity of the word, the greater the shock effect when it does finally get used, and therefore, the greater the feeling of release. Perhaps, an associated but not similarly popular reaction is that of increasing pain tolerance. Yes, swear words can increase your pain threshold. An experiment to test this idea was done where participants were told to put their hand in a bucket of freezing water. Some of the participants were allowed to swear, whilst some were not. Both groups were tested to see how long they could sustain keeping their hands submerged. People in the groups that were allowed to swear were able to keep their hands submerged for nearly 50% longer. Scientists hypothesized that swearing initiates the fight-or-flight response in people, and that this is what reduces their sensitivity to pain. It's the same reason why even the least cussy people almost effortlessly blurt out their favorite profanity when they stub their toe on furniture. A 2018 study also found that swearing a few times during a workout can make you stronger. Participants exhibited higher grip strength when they were allowed to swear. Then there is perhaps the more well-known aspect of swearing: its use as a gesture of openness. People feel more comfortable with each other when they know they can swear in their presence. The cathartic use of swear words can often be one of the ways in which people wind down, but it also signals to them, you can be honest with me and I can be honest with you. That was one of the tactics that 2018 US Senate candidate Beto O'Rourke used to appeal to the masses. Instead of the carefully chosen ties or the fabricated body language to seem more leader-like, Beto's strategy was simply to swear. Instead of looking like the typical politicians, who are often hard to relate to, Beto wanted to look more like the average Joe and sound like one too. American culture has seen an increase in self-expression and individualism, both of which are associated with a higher use of swear words. Books published in the mid-2000s sometimes contained nearly 28 times as many profanities as their counterparts from the 1950s. Novelists and writers, whilst a tad surprised at just how much it increased, are nonetheless not too taken aback by the trajectory themselves. It's perhaps an accurate reflection of how literature has moved away from being accessible only to the social elites to now being something that is more representative of reality. Less polished, less formal, less choreographed, and more authentic. But that's not the only use we have for swear words. Turns out, automated call systems in America can recognize swear words. If you swear at them, they immediately redirect you to a person. Operators built this technology in 1970 to recognize when their customers are upset, and are therefore most likely to leave for competitors. There is also this assumption that when a person is fuming, it may be because they have an issue that is not easily fixable, warranting the presence of a more qualified person rather than a robot. So next time you call a helpline and they're trying to sell you things that you don't want to buy, just tell them to swive off. If it doesn't work, well shit. Passwords. A string of nonsensical characters that separate us from our finances, our medical records, our school information, our entire digital life. It's amazing how much power these random characters hold over us, how much they can do, how a simple set of numbers or letters can represent us in the digital world. Just like your ID card or passport lets people know what country you're a citizen of, your passwords let companies, websites, and digital products know who you are. The concept of passwords is thrilling, yet scary. The idea that you don't have to be physically present to verify your identity before getting access to the deepest private information is amazing. But the fact that anyone in the world can pose as you by simply finding out what this random string of characters is can be terrifying. When we think of passwords, we think of logging onto our favorite websites, standing at the ATM to withdraw cash, or getting into our phones and computers. When we think of passwords, we think of the digital world. But the truth is, passwords existed long before computers. Just like many other technological innovations, the use of passwords began in the military. To figure out who was friend or foe, soldiers would create passwords that were passed around camp. When they encountered a stranger, the person was then asked for the password to verify their identity. If the intruder didn't know the password, the soldiers would know that they were foe and take them prisoner. Over time, this use of passwords evolved into a password and counter-password system. In the opening days of the Battle of Normandy, the US 101st Airborne Division created the password Flash, but with a twist. The word Flash was a challenge, and the reply to that, which was the counter-password, was Thunder. This was only one of the many passwords and counter-passwords they used, as they created a new one every 3 days before it got compromised. Now you can say that Flash and Thunder are pretty simple words, maybe too simple for enemy soldiers to figure out, and you'll be right. But the thing about passwords is that, as much as they need to be complex so they aren't easy to crack, they also need to be easy enough to remember, else you get locked out of your own troop. And to date, this is how most people still choose passwords. Even at a time when we have password managers and various other ways to store complex passwords so we never have to remember them all, more often than not, people choose passwords that are super easy for them to remember. Usually it's a name. It could be theirs, a significant other, a pet, or a family member. Whoever it is, more than half of Americans use names as their passwords. Michael, Jordan, Jennifer, Hunter, Harley, Buster, Andrew, Charlie, and Robert being the most common. When people think of passwords, they often think of protection, and when people think of protection, well, we all think of superheroes, right? So passwords like Dragon, Master, Superman, and Batman are all extremely common. They don't just show the characters we like the most, they also show how much importance, hope, and trust we have in these characters to protect us, even when they aren't real. Sports have a similar effect on us. We might not look to these teams and players to protect us like superheroes, but we look to them for strength, for hope, for joy, for laughter and entertainment. Sports bring happiness to billions of people around the world, so it's no surprise that when these people are asked to come up with a special word they can never forget, they pick the sport they love the most. Baseball, football, and soccer are the most commonly used passwords relating to sports. And when you dig deeper, European football team names like Manchester United, Chelsea, Arsenal, Barcelona, and Liverpool are all very frequently used as passwords in one form or another. Truly, you never walk alone. There's a chance I've probably mentioned part of one of your passwords already. They're all different, but strikingly similar. When we're not picking passwords with our hearts, we're coming up with them with our heads. We try to be smart and cheeky, clever and quirky. We pick things like let me in, trust no one, ABC123, and everyone's favorite, password. More often than not, when we choose passwords like these, we think of them as unique. But when you consider the fact that the word password is the second most commonly used password in the world, you realize that we humans are, in truth, very predictable. Although they are called passwords, passwords are not always words. Sometimes they are simply a string of random characters, and other times they're numbers, passcodes, or personal identification numbers, pins. When faced with the challenge of coming up with a number for a password, most people pick the most significant date in their lives. Sometimes it's a birthday, other times it's an anniversary. This is especially true for pins that require 4 digits, like ATM transaction pins. When people aren't choosing 1984 or 2002, 1 through 9 is the most commonly used, with the length dependent on how long the password needs to be. So whether it's 123456 or 12345678, 90, 12345, or simply 1234, many times it starts with a 123. Sometimes there's an ABC and then a 123 attached. And when it isn't simply numbers from 1 to 0, it's 6 sixes or 7 sevens or 696969. Most people, when asked to come up with a password, try to come up with something easy, something they can visualize, something they can easily remember. There is one method people use to come up with passwords that you might not figure out right away. On first glance, these might look like really strong passwords. They're not names of family members or pets, they're not our favorite superheroes or sports teams, and they're so random you can't possibly guess them, right? Well, wrong. You see, all of these passwords are doing something called password walking, which is basically creating a password by simply typing out all the characters that sit together on a keyboard. Now look at these passwords again. Notice the pattern. Your fingers are basically walking through the keyboard as you type them in. They might look convincing, but the truth is they are not very secure. You're not the first person to try this, and you won't be the last. It's surprising to see how easy our passwords are to figure out. The patterns in the way we come up with these seemingly random string of characters, our collective reasoning for picking password as our password. We understand just how important these words are, so why do we put in such little effort into coming up with them, knowing how dangerous it could be if someone figured them out? When we think of someone hacking into an account, we often think of a programmer in a black hoodie in a pitch dark room with 100 monitors and nothing but the sound of clicking keyboards filling the atmosphere. But the truth is, most hacking is simply someone guessing your password successfully, or just finding it on some leaked database out there. It's a lot simpler than you'd imagine sometimes. There are a number of ways hackers use to find your password, and the most common is called the dictionary attack. The dictionary attack tries every single word in the dictionary against the password, until there's a match. Contrary to what you might think, this isn't just a normal dictionary. This dictionary is a file that includes all of the most commonly used passwords. To understand just how much information commonly used passwords, and the dictionary file can contain the most commonly used thousands or even millions of passwords. Research has shown that around 68% of Americans use the same password on multiple accounts. And to be honest, we've all been there. There's yet another site asking you for a username and password every single day, and there's barely enough space in your brain to remember your old password that coming up with a new one is just impossible. But the problem with using the same password for multiple accounts is that once a hacker gets a hold of one of your accounts, they automatically have access to all of them. Yes, the big names like Apple and Google might have a lot of security details protecting your passwords, but what about that small obscure site that you registered on many years ago now? Who knows? The company might now be bankrupt and have no means of keeping the password of their users safe. Or, in the worst case scenario, they sell that information to someone shady. Once your password for that account is discovered, your entire digital life is in jeopardy. Immediately, someone from anywhere in the world could have access to your work life, school life, finances, medical records, everything. And there's nothing any of the big companies like Apple and Google can do about it. Sometimes our passwords aren't hacked or discovered or stolen. We willingly give them to other people. Research has shown that around 37% of people share their passwords with others. This is most likely down to streaming services like Netflix and Hulu. This isn't surprising when you discover that 88 million streaming accounts are borrowed. Now imagine that you give the password of your Netflix account to your friends and family, but that's also your password for everything else. That's like sharing the key to your house, your safe, and all your personal belongings with everyone. Now at this point, I'm sure we're all wondering, so how exactly do you create a strong password? What even is considered strong to begin with? Aren't they all just numbers and letters anyway? Well, the first thing you can do is to choose multiple words that are completely unrelated. You can mix words in from different languages, use the name of a local business, or a family secret that's been passed down from generations. Instead of just using Michael as your password, try Bonjour Souvenir Mona Lisa III. Although the words are completely random, a password like Bonjour Souvenir Mona Lisa III paints you a mental picture that's completely unique to you, something that no dictionary attack will be able to figure out. I mean, until now if you actually decide to use it, but whatever. When we try our best to make our passwords secure, we often end up with a leet speak version of everything we've been talking about up until this point. Leet speak is basically replacing standard letters for numbers or special characters that look like them. So Michael becomes Michael, Jordan becomes Jordan, and Jennifer becomes Jennifer. And while these are certainly more secure than plain text, they are still very susceptible to hackers because of how popular they've become. It might have worked at first, but then everyone started doing it. And now that everyone's doing it, it's easier to expect and less effective. So instead of swapping out letters for their leet speak variants, try inserting completely random characters into the mix instead. It could be the currency sign that's unique to your country, or perhaps a code that has some sort of significance to you. Something that's easy for you to remember, but difficult for anyone else to guess as a part of a regular word. Passwords have been around since the beginning of computing, but it seems that we may be seeing the very last of them. Because the truth is, even the longest string of random characters, completely devoid of linguistic meaning that's unguessable by even the best of systems, can still be separated from the user and used at any time and from anywhere in the world. This is why in recent years, biometric verification has become more commonplace. Every modern smartphone now comes with either a fingerprint sensor or an iris or retina scanner. Sometimes both. You can now make purchases on app stores, log into your mobile banking platforms, and even make purchases in real life, without a password, using these biometric methods of authentication. With these new ways of authenticating a user becoming more popular, all of which are a lot more secure than the password, slowly the world is moving to a point where we will completely abandon the use of passwords for digital security. For now, however, the best way to protect yourself from getting your data stolen through your password is enabling two-factor authentication. Most companies now offer 2FA, and where possible, this is for sure your best bet of keeping your information safe and secure. There are three main methods of authentication: something you are, something you know, and something you have. Two-factor authentication basically combines any of these two to verify you. Something you are is biometrics, so your fingerprint, your iris, or your retina. These are things that are in you and cannot be detached from you. Well, except under gruesome circumstances. But all things being equal, these things are who you are. They are completely unique to you, and no one else can have those things except you. Something you have is either your phone, a physical key or a token, or your SIM card. Usually companies will send a unique code to your registered phone number to ensure that you have the SIM card that's trying to log into their service. Finally, something you know is a password. When you combine two of these three, say a fingerprint scanner and a password, or a physical token and a PIN, you get the most secure type of authentication available now. So next time you're on a website and they ask you for a password, take some time to think about it. Don't type the first thing that comes to mind, because chances are it'll just be password, and that's like putting a closed sign in front of your house, but still leaving the front door unlocked. And I don't know about you, but I don't like unwarranted visitors. Stay safe. Your life literally depends on it. What is the most complex word in the English language? At first, you might think of something long, like supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, which is among the longest words of the English language. However, long does not necessarily mean complex. By complex, we mean the most definitions. The more definitions a word has, the more scenarios it will inevitably be used in, the more complex the word becomes. Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious simply means extraordinarily good or wonderful. And that's really it. See, there's not many situations where you would find yourself using such a word, as elegant as it may seem. Okay, so supercalifragilisticexpialidocious isn't the most complex word, but it could also be pneumono-ultramicroscopic silicovolcanoconiosis. But again, length isn't everything. That also has a simple definition. According to Oxford dictionaries, it is an artificially long word said to mean a lung disease caused by inhaling very fine ash and sand dust. Maybe instead of pneumono-ultramicroscopic silicovolcanoconiosis or supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, it could be floxynalcynihilipilification, which is a really fun word that means, according to Grammarly, the estimation of something as worthless. Ironically, it's a pretty worthless word itself, and is only really used as an example of a long word. Seems fitting though, doesn't it? But how about sesquipedalianism? Alright, maybe I'm just including this here for its definition, but it's still long nevertheless. And it means the tendency to use long words. But again, it isn't the most complex word. As intuitive as it may sound, the more common the word is, the more complex it becomes. That's because the more and more we use a certain word, the more connotations or implied meanings it starts to acquire. Now, none of those stupidly long words were the most complex word. So what is it? Well, officially, it is set. Unofficially, it's run. Yeah, those two three-letter words have the most definitions in the English language, and therefore are the most complex. Run, with 645 definitions, technically holds the title, or will in a 2037 edition of the Oxford English Dictionary. Currently, it's held by set, with 430 meanings. There's literally over 220 pages needed to cover every single definition of set. Don't believe me? Well, you can set something in a certain position. A novel, movie, or play can be set in New York City. A bracelet can be set in emeralds. You can set type by printing. You can set a table. You can set a plant to grow. You could be set thinking by something. You could have set a problem, set an example, set a record, set a date, or set your watch to a specific time. And speaking of setting things to a specific time, you can also set your alarm clock to ring at a specific time. You can set volume. Something can be set in cooking, and a broken bone can also be set. The sun can set, a fire can set, and someone can be set in a seat. If it sounds like a lot, that's just the first meaning. There could be a set of false teeth. You could have a robotics set. You could watch a TV set. Speaking of TV, in filmmaking, a set is a location that something is filmed in. A filming set could also be the area in which something is filmed. The director was interviewed on set. For the third definition, there could be a set procedure in something. You could have a set expression. These words are set beforehand, and I have said about listing some of the definitions of set, which I have done. Now look, if I list off all of them, you're gonna fall asleep and I'm gonna get bored. So that was long, and we barely even scratched the surface of the sets that there are. But what about run? Run may at first seem to have one definition: to run. To move at a pace that is faster than a walk, never keeping both feet on the ground at the same time. However, run could also mean competing in a race. She ran in the 200 meters. You can spend the whole day running after kids. If you're a babysitter, you probably know this very well. A roomer can run through a group. Someone driving could, though it certainly isn't advisable, run a red light, or run their car off the road. Boats can run rapids. You can run your hands under a faucet. And if you were very sad, or just have allergies, your nose would be running. Not literally though, that'd be a nightmare. Red dye can run if you wash your whites with colors. You can run a business. Everything could be running according to plan. A car runs on fuel to operate correctly, and a course can run for an entire semester. A play could be running 15 minutes late. You know how newspapers are constantly being dramatic? Well, say there was a purchase of a painting. Newspapers would run the story. Priceless painting purchased ran the headline. Except instead of a painting, it's a banana taped to a wall. Looks like somebody got their pockets ran. You can go for a run. I could set off on a run, and run has a clear run at the title of the most complex word. You could run for president. It could have had a run of bad luck, and that bad luck can stand out from the general run of bad luck stories. Speaking of bad luck, some people believe that black cats and walking under ladders is bad luck. Imagine there was a creepy guy who lived across your street who had an irritable black cat that was given the run of the neighborhood. That wouldn't be great for the people who believe in black cat bad luck. Also, paint can run. Not literally, that'd be very odd, but it can trickle down when applied too thickly. All this time, we've been discussing the most complex words. However, we've been defining complex word as most definitions. But what if we change how we interpret the word? What if now complex means hardest to understand? Well, now one word springs to mind immediately. Literally. I literally just thought of literally when I thought of words hardest to understand. Right now, I just used the word to increase emphasis on the sentence. However, the primary definition is in a literal manner of sense, or exactly. The number of emphasis uses for the word literally by far surpasses the uses for the primary definition in everyday conversations. If the word is used for emphasis, then some odd things come up that are, well, complex. According to Merriam-Webster, literally is similar to figuratively, one of its sister words. Figuratively and literally stylish uses can cause some problems. If literally means in a literal sense or manner, what does that have to do with placing emphasis? The two definitions don't have anything to do with each other. They weren't supposed to be similar, but because of how we decided to use it, they literally had to put it in the dictionary. Moving on, we have another confusing word. Ironic. It references irony within its primary definition, using or characterized by irony. We'll come back to irony in a few seconds. For now, let's focus on irony's other definition. Happening in the opposite way to what is expected, and typically causing amusement because of it. Computers are helpful. They contain many tools to assist you or allow you to do things. When's the last time your computer crashed, though? The answer varies, but a similar question's answer doesn't. How often does your computer crash? The answer is likely quite often. Ironically, computers crash often when they're supposed to save you time. That use of irony is confusing. It's something that goes against what you'd expect. Now, let's return to irony. The other irony. Searching it up in Google brings up several definitions. Turn your attention to the primary definition, the expression of one's meaning by using language that normally signifies the opposite, typically for humorous or emphatic effect. Wait, back up a second. Isn't that sarcasm? When you purposely say things sarcastically? Or is it ironically? Do you see where things are starting to go awry? Turns out, sarcasm is irony. Sort of. Sarcasm is the use of irony to mock or convey contempt. So you can see some words have definitions that are just other words. Anyways, back to irony. Again. The second definition of irony is a state of affairs or event that seems contrary to what one expects and is often amusing as a result. Oh, what's that? There's multiple types of irony? Yeah, there are. In fact, 3 types. Verbal irony, dramatic irony, and situational irony. Verbal irony is very similar to sarcasm, speaking untruths in a way that is so obviously not the case that it comes off as a joke. For example, if it's raining really hard, someone could say, "What lovely weather we're having at the moment." What separates it from sarcasm is that sarcasm is specifically intended to mock, while verbal irony doesn't have to be mocking. Dramatic irony is commonly associated with the theater. It's where the audience knows something that's gonna happen, but the characters don't, and the characters say something ironic. For example, Vocabulary.com gives an excellent example. If there was a movie about the Titanic, and when the ship was just about to hit the iceberg, a character stops and says, "It's so pretty, I could just die," the audience knows that the character will likely die. So therefore, it is ironic. Situational irony is the type of irony that is comedic. According to dictionary.com, situational irony is irony involving a situation in which actions have an effect that is opposite from what was intended, so that the outcome is opposite to what was expected. And in our situation of the most complex word in the English language, talking about irony seems a bit ironic because there's so many definitions. There's a lot of other complicated words in English that aren't thought of as complicated until, well, someone tells you that they are. And if nobody else will, I will. For example, take like, simple enough when you think of it, in like manner with, similarly to, in the manner characteristic of. An example of a sentence with that definition would be something like, she ran like a lightning bolt. Another use comes to mind, he's like his mother. Oh, and she's more like 40 to 50 years old. However, there are also the old-fashioned poetic definitions of like, such as, I cannot remember a like instance, or drawing, painting, and like arts. Oh, and don't forget the instances of like that are oddly placed in a sentence. Something like, the guy was standing against the wall, looking very tough like. There's like a few more basic ones, but let's skip over those for now. You get the point. However, the informal definitions are more interesting. Sentences such as, so, like, why'd you do that? Use the informal definition of like. The dreaded use is very common in informal or in-person speech, and it's used as a filler for when your brain is trying to catch up with your speech. It's like our brains collectively all decided to use like as, like, a filler word. Get it? That was a lot, and even all that wasn't even close to covering all the weirdness and inconsistencies that there are in the English language. However, it is still shocking that the most complex words in the English language are only 3 letters long each. Set, and soon to be run. I guess there's lessons in all of this. Simple sets of ideas can run far and lead to complex results. And honestly, we really make learning English a lot more difficult than necessary.
Not gonna lie, the world is kind of funny when you step back and really think about it. In a day and age where everyone takes everything seriously, it's nice to pause and consider the intriguing and, sometimes, flat out just weird thoughts that some of us have, but for the most part never share. Some of them are pretty interesting, like the fact that the Earth's population has doubled in the past 50 years, but it took almost 2 million years to get to the 3.7 billion human population in 1971. For every person alive today, there's about 15 dead people throughout all of human history. Or that one day, in the far future, someone will be the very last person to die of cancer. Others are honestly just annoying. You normally breathe and blink on autopilot, but now since I just mentioned it, you're doing both of them manually. Sorry, by the way. Or the fact that your tongue is probably touching the top of your mouth right now, but no matter where you put it, it just doesn't feel comfortable. Why do women's pants have fake pockets, but babies' pants have real pockets? These are shower thoughts. Whether you have these thoughts in the shower, or in the car while you're in traffic, or when you're laying in bed for hours at night when you just can't sleep, the location doesn't matter. The Earth is revolving around the Sun is revolving around the center of our galaxy, and our galaxy is in a unique orbit with the nearest galaxy to our own, Andromeda. So, with that being said, every single second, the Earth is moving into a new position in space that it has never been before, and will never return to again. Ever. Your age in years is how many times you've circled the sun, but your age in months is how many times the moon has circled you. If you could steal just a second of life from everyone on Earth, you'd be able to survive for nearly another 240 years. But did you know that 2 people can be born at the same exact time, but because of time zones, have different birthdays, or even be born in different years? Maybe there is no reason as to why we're here. Or at least, that's what we're supposed to think. Maybe we're just characters in a universe-sized video game. Sleep could be a save point, which is why we really don't know what happens between the second we fall asleep and when we eventually regain consciousness some hours later. We also trust our bodies enough to just go unconscious and continue breathing so we don't die. If you think about it, it's actually healthy and recommended to sleep for 4 months a year. But in order to bring us back, alarm clocks are made for the sole purpose of being annoying enough to shake humans into consciousness. You might want to smash it and break it, but don't. Every analog clock that no longer works actually shows the time on it where it died. If you order a new clock to be delivered to you and it arrives safely, your time has arrived. Speaking of being conscious humans, there's a lot that goes on inside our bodies. Your brain makes your heart work, and your heart makes your brain work. It's really quiet given the things that are going on inside us right now. Like, imagine if you could hear blood gushing through your veins, or if every time we blinked, it made a noise. But wait, if everyone on the planet blinked at the same exact time, nobody would be able to tell that it just happened. We have eyes to see, we have a nose to smell. We have ears to hear and hands to feel, and we have a mouth to taste. But is this every sense that there is? Could there be other senses that we just can't perceive because we don't have the means to? We just haven't evolved to need them because it's not needed on Earth. But what about on other planets? When we colonize Mars, will the far future humans evolve to have different senses than we do today? Evolution is an interesting idea. The voice inside your head has also evolved with you over time. Do you remember if it was the voice of a kid when you were younger? If you heard your 8-year-old voice today, would you recognize it? Being able to record things digitally is something that we all overlook. We view old writing like the Wealth of Nations, or the Bible, or the Epic of Gilgamesh, and we see them as some of the most influential pieces of writing to ever exist. But in the year 3000, we'll be able to look back at 1,000-year-old videos and recordings just like we view old writing today. If you're watching this, by the way, hello. But due to deepfakes and people getting really good at editing and faking things, there's only going to be a very brief period in human history where videos can actually be trusted as evidence. People see glasses as a sign of intelligence for some reason, even though we all failed a test in order to get them. But you know, Antarctica is probably the smartest and most educated continent on Earth, considering it's populated almost exclusively by scientists. Science has taught us a lot about the universe, about the planet we live on, and even what goes on inside our bodies. One of the most interesting things that we figured out, though, is that the brain is the only organ that knows it's actually an organ. And on top of that, it actually named itself. But the brain takes time to process information. It's very quick, but not instantaneous. So technically, your body is living ever so slightly in the future. We live in a society, and we set up and made rules that everyone should follow in order to keep things going smoothly. But some of them are just kind of funny. For example, parking tickets are just speeding tickets for going 0 miles per hour where it isn't allowed. We have cars that can go upwards of 200 miles an hour, but there's almost nowhere where you're legally allowed to go that fast in them. In life, people always tell you to stay in school and don't do drugs. But when you get sick, the best advice you get is to be told to do drugs and stay out of school. You never truly appreciate the fact that you can breathe through your nose until you're sick and suddenly lose half the ability to keep yourself alive. Everyone has taken medicine and seen a warning label to not operate heavy machinery while on the use of it. Now, they're probably talking about cars and such, but almost everyone immediately thinks of like a forklift, or a crane, or a Caterpillar 797F. Speaking of cranes though, have you ever actually seen a crane being built? They kinda just show up out of nowhere and then disappear randomly. Language is just weird. I made a whole video about it a couple weeks ago. Try to think of another English word that ends in MT other than dreamt. I more closely represent the letter X as a math variable as opposed to it being a real letter. It's just a fake Z anyway. Crane is the 9,618th most used word in the English language. But you really don't need to know that many words to speak English well. Learning the top 100 words in most languages will usually contain at least 50% of the words you use in everyday conversation. Bring this up to 500 words, and you'll get to around 80%. This should allow you to go out in public and order food without an issue. But when you're at a restaurant and you're waiting for a waiter, you become the waiter. On the topic of food, food also doesn't really go bad, just something else starts eating it before you do. Bacteria. Also, I was in a public restroom the other day and it had one of those touch-free soap dispensers. I don't really get the point of those though, because as long as the soap does its job, like to remove the bacteria from my hands, does it really matter if I touch the dispenser or not? But one of the nastiest things there is out there is what you might be watching this video on right now. A phone. Most people check their phones nearly 100 times a day, and I don't remember the last time that I thoroughly washed off my phone. There's so many things that you can do on a phone, there's almost unlimited possibilities. Cell phone providers take advantage of this and sell unlimited minutes, unlimited texts, and unlimited data for any given month. But in reality, you're actually only getting 44,600 minutes a month at most. So they're kind of lying, but not really. There's about 730 hours in a month. If you work a full-time job, you're going to be working at least 40 hours a week, or 160 hours a month. It's all worth it though whenever that check comes in. But sometimes, you spend money you don't have. In a way, debit cards pay for things with the past hours of your life, and credit cards pay for things with the future hours of your life. But if you don't pay your taxes, you'll get thrown in jail. But jails are typically funded with taxpayer money. So if you go to jail for tax evasion, you're living off of taxes because you didn't pay taxes. Taxes are like a subscription fee to your country that you can't cancel, even if you don't like the service. The only reason we want or feel the need to make money is to get rid of all of it in the end. For a very brief second, every 19-year-old is the oldest teenager in the world. In the same way, every single person alive was, at one point, the youngest person in the entire world. But even more interesting than both of these is the fact that, for the smallest period of time, you were exactly pi years old. Walking is just you continuously screwing up your balance so you fall into your other leg, and the process repeats until you reach your destination. Knocking on someone's door is basically punching their house until they give you attention. Similarly, clapping is just giving yourself a high five for someone else's hard work. Clapping is universally a pretty good thing. It's a way to show your appreciation for something without someone having to see you face to face. Facial expressions are something that we kind of just don't notice day to day, but they're pretty interesting. Your skull doesn't change shape at all. Your skin, your flesh, just warps and bends in ways to form a smile, or a frown, or anything else. Actually, you've never even truly seen your own face before. You've only viewed it in pictures or in reflections. The rich used to pay the poor for their entertainment, but today, the poor pay the rich for entertainment. Now, you don't always pay, like YouTube is a thing, but YouTube itself is older than some people watching this video. Watching videos, though, is just being entertained by super tiny pixels changing colors and turning on and off. So to be honest, existence is just really weird. There are only 2 days in your entire lifetime that aren't 24 hours long. The day you're born, and the day you die. So, hurry those showers up. You're using all my hot water.
Have you ever paused to think about how one of the most famous sentences of all time doesn't make grammatical sense? Well, because we all apparently heard it wrong and continue to say it wrong. According to the man himself, Neil Armstrong, what he did say that day when he stepped foot on the moon was, "One small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind," which makes much more sense. There can be a lot of things that sound strange at first, but as we've all come to find out, sometimes reality can be stranger than fiction. Like how the sounds of the T-Rexes speaking in Jurassic Park are actually just tortoises having sex, and how the eagle only sounds like this because of Hollywood magic when in reality it sounds more like this. Here are true facts that sound completely made up. It's pretty common knowledge at this point that humans can live with just one kidney, but did you also know that you can live without a spleen, an appendix, a gallbladder, tonsils, 6 of your ribs, and 1 lung? In fact, many people do, and they lead pretty normal lives. The only thing you can't do with just 1 lung is participate in strenuous exercises or run long distances. But with just 1 lung, you could run from the United States to Russia, since the shortest distance between the two countries is just 2.4 miles. How comforting. This distance is measured from Russia's Big Diomede Island to America's Little Diomede Island. Why is America's island smaller? We might never know, but you know what is really big, thick, and long? A giraffe's neck. Considering how massive these things are, it's incredible to think that they have the same number of bones as a human neck. They're just way bigger, and it's not just them and us. All mammals have the same number of bones in their neck. When we were younger, we were taught that there are 7 days in a week, 4 weeks in a month, and 52 weeks in a year, but the truth is that's wrong. Well, technically it's correct, but it only works here on Earth. On other planets, it's completely different. On Venus, for example, a day is longer than an entire year. It's probably helpful to mention that a day on a particular planet is defined as the time it takes that planet to spin around once on its axis, and a year is the time it takes for the planet to orbit around the star, in this case, the Sun. Pluto sadly wasn't able to complete a full orbit around the Sun in the 76 years from when it was discovered in 1930 to when it was declassified as a planet in 2006. A small planet with a really long orbit. But you know what is really, really, really long? It's the name of a hill in New Zealand.
Tau matawhakatangihanga ko au au o tamate atu ripu kakapiki maunga horo nuku pokai whenua ki tanata.
You're welcome. Here's a true fact that sounds completely made up. As of December 2022, more than half the people who earn six figures in the US reported living paycheck to paycheck. We've all faced rejections and insults. Don't let them get to you. They're just lessons that we all had to learn one way or another. The founder of Lamborghini, for example, had to be rejected by Ferrari before he got the desire to create Lamborghini. Steve Jobs had to be kicked out of his own company before he could bring it back to life. Microsoft had to stop producing newer versions of the Internet Explorer to, well, realize that they shouldn't have ever made it in the first place, but you get the point. Time is an illusion, and if you don't study history, it can be quite jarring to learn that sometimes. Things aren't as timely as we think. Did you know that we sent a man to the moon before we put wheels on suitcases? Just imagine how stressful it must have been for Neil to carry all that luggage to and from space. The invention of the iPhone in 2007 is closer to the existence of Cleopatra than Cleopatra was to the building of the pyramids of Giza. And although Oxford University is older than the Aztec Empire, it isn't the first university to ever exist. India's Nalanda University was in operation for hundreds of years before Oxford. We made lighters before we made matches, sharks existed before grass. Heck, sharks were in existence before the rings of Saturn. It really makes you appreciate the beauty of human civilization. We've only been here for a short time, but we've been able to achieve so much. We're so special, aren't we? That's what I told Rebecca before she broke up with me, but now I know I was wrong because she wasn't special. She was bananas. I don't mean that as an insult because we're all bananas. At least 50% of each of us because humans share 50% of our DNA with bananas and with fruit flies. As it turns out, our profound exclusivity is neither profound nor exclusive. What is exclusive, however, is a randomly shuffled deck of cards. It may seem rather mundane, but the sequence of a randomly shuffled deck of cards has never been seen before and will never be seen again. A standard deck of cards has 52 cards, which means there are 52 factorial different ways the cards can be arranged when shuffled randomly. That number, 52 factorial, is 8 with 67 zeros after it. To put this in perspective, the universe has existed for over 13 billion years, but let's round it up to 15 billion. Let's also assume there are around 2 trillion galaxies, each containing approximately 100 trillion star systems each. If each star system had 10 planets and each planet hosted 10 billion life forms, every one of those life forms could shuffle a deck of cards every second since the beginning of time, and they still wouldn't produce a repeated sequence. That is simply insane. Speaking of arrangements, some countries aren't arranged the way we think they ought to be. Finland and North Korea are separated by just one country. New York is closer to the equator than it is to Rome, and Bangladesh went to war and won against Pakistan, two countries that are separated by India, the 7th largest country in the world. And get this, all three countries were once considered the same country. Talk about sibling rivalry. The logistics for that war must have cost several buttloads, which is a legitimate unit of measurement equal to 126 gallons. Remember when you were young and your mom told you not to swallow apple seeds or a tree would grow in your belly? Well, it turns out she was wrong, trees can't grow in people, but she was right in telling you not to swallow apple seeds. Eating apple seeds can lead to cyanide poisoning. Don't worry too much though, you need the seeds from at least 150 apples for that. Speaking of apples, Steve Jobs chose the name of his company to get back at his former employer, Atari. Because phone books, a book that had a list of names, addresses, and phone numbers of the businesses in the area, were written in alphabetical order. Apple would come before Atari, so whenever people searched for a computer business in the phone book, they would find Steve's company first. Suffice it to say that they no longer need that slight competitive advantage. Fresh, clean water can do wonders, but how fresh is the water we drink? Did you know the probability that at least one of the molecules of the water you drank today passed through a dinosaur is 100%? We somehow keep coming back to dinosaurs. Maybe it's a sign that Rebecca and I should be tyranno work things out. Because at the end of the day, mistakes happen. Like the time Switzerland accidentally invaded another country. In 2007, around 171 of Switzerland's troops accidentally went into Liechtenstein. The Swiss government formally apologized, but the governor of Liechtenstein wasn't worried and excused the situation. It's happened before.
he said. Liechtenstein is really nice, as you can see. So nice, in fact, that in the Austro-Prussian War of 1866, Liechtenstein sent a company of 80 soldiers to war, only to have 81 return. Not only did they not have any casualties, but an Austrian liaison officer joined them on the way home. But it also helps to have luck. Luck like Anatoly Brogowski had. He was a researcher working at the Soviet Union's most powerful particle accelerator, the U-70 synchrotron. He was down there one day to fix something. He leaned down to look at a part of the machine without realizing the accelerator was active at the time and stuck his head directly into the beam bath. He reported seeing a tremendously bright flash, likely due to his optic nerves being excited through the roof. Believe it or not, he actually wanted to cover it up and decided to continue working. As time passed, Anatoly noticed huge swelling developing along the regions where the beam had entered and exited his head. He slowly started developing radiation sickness. There was no hiding anymore, so he sought help. The physician in charge feared the worst, but as it turned out, Anatoly had unintentionally received a version of proton beam therapy often used to treat cancer. Thanks to the physics of the proton beam therapy, most of the energy that might have otherwise killed Anatoly was deposited outside of his skull. Despite suffering seizures and epilepsy, Anatoly lives on to this day. However, he refused an offer from the United States to be a research subject. Oh, and half of his face stopped aging. Talk about expensive Botox. It's something Rebecca would have needed. Oh well, she's gone now. But I mean, for all her flaws, she was always very kind to me. Despite what we went through, despite how rough the breakup was, she put her hand in mine, looked me in the eye assuredly, and told me, "We can still be cousins." That, of course, was completely made up. Or was it?
How many sides does a piece of paper have? I'll give you a second. 2?
No.
It's actually 6. You don't realize it until you start stacking it. There's a lot of things in life that take us by surprise. A lot of things that aren't really as they seem. Like elephants being herbivores. They'd be a lot more scary if they were carnivores. Your parents told you not to talk to strangers. Yet, here we are. When you're talking or conversing with someone online, a lot of times you don't really know that much about them. The nice thing about not knowing anyone's age on the internet is that you can pretty much get in an argument with an 8-year-old and leave feeling superior. That serotonin boost can be exactly what you need some days. A lot of us could use a boost of those happy chemicals to make our lives a lot easier. When you experience depression, your brain refuses to produce, let's call it a happy hormone, as a reward for your brain cells doing what they're supposed to do. And, as a result, your cells go on strike, refusing to work for no pay, and the whole system comes crashing down, benefiting absolutely nobody involved. Sounds strikingly familiar. History repeats. And speaking of history, it must have been really awkward being the first historian to have ever existed. I can just imagine that conversation happening. It's like, "So, what are you doing?" "Just writing down everything that's been happening." Why? But the way we view history is now changing. At some point, the internet will be older than all humans alive, and future generations will have tons of high-quality video footage of so many extinct animals, old civilizations, and where Santa used to live before the Arctic melted and disappeared. That might make you feel like an old doomer, but remember, the number of people older than you never increases. It only decreases. It's like a lifelong race to be ranked number 1, except the prize for winning is just death. And out of the billions of people who have ever lived, just one of them suffered the most agonizing death of us all. So far. But maybe that happened hundreds of years ago. Until trains were invented in 1804, every human who ever lived that experienced a speed upwards of 56 miles per hour was falling to their death. Normally, the floor is what stops gravity from killing us. But if we get too far away from it, gravity uses the floor to kill us. Life is short, so they say. But life is only short if you love your life. Otherwise, it is very, very painfully long. It's like playing a game. In this case, it'd be more painful to lose the game by 1 point than by 100 points. You know what I mean? But enough with being morbid. Good dreams are basically a free trial of a life you could have been living. But in a way, if there are an infinite number of universes, then our dreams aren't actually dreams. They're clips and previews from another universe that we can see into. But our universe isn't so bad. Being able to go to sleep without worrying that you'll get eaten by some random animal is probably the most privileged thing about our modern world. It wasn't always like that, so we should really appreciate it. We don't really appreciate a lot of free things in life, like taking your health for granted all the time. Until you're sick. Only then do you actually care. Oh, and email. We take our own planet for granted almost daily. National parks are a perpetual reminder of what the world would look like if it weren't for humans. Ironic how we enjoy them so much, isn't it? I just blinked, and most of the time, we barely even notice how often we blink. Characters in first-person video games never blink, if you think about it. It doesn't feel like much. It's just one of those manual processes that our bodies do for us that we just forget about. We really take for granted how smooth the insides of our eyelids are. Imagine if they were like sandpaper. Us humans can barely live with one another without trying to kill each other. So the fact that people can convince themselves that meeting aliens would go smoothly is nothing short of pure hopium. If they got upset with us, they'd just throw another one of those big rocks at Earth and we'd be toast. And speaking of big rocks, the asteroid that ended the dinosaurs' reign on Earth was technically the highest ratio of killing birds to one stone in Earth's history. From all the life on land to all the life in Earth's oceans, 99% of everything was wiped out in an instant. We are part of that remaining 1%. I liked that quote so much, I put it on a hoodie. You can get it here. Still, the deep ocean is terrifying. People will swim in ocean at the beaches, even though there are definitely many corpses in it. People will not swim in a pool with a corpse in it though. So, therefore, as weird as it sounds, humans all have a corpse to water ratio that is acceptable for them to swim in. You can see why people don't like oceans now, huh? Water makes fabric a darker shade even though water is clear. I guess I probably should have taken my clothes off before I got in the shower. Anyway, after I shower, I normally brush my teeth, and I'm super grateful to be able to do that. Most animals have never seen their own teeth, let alone be able to clean them. As much as you'd like to believe it, wisdom teeth aren't useless. They're actually the reason some oral surgeons are able to make a living. It's quite the career. It's weird. We choose our careers when we're worst informed about what they're actually like. Some people will work the same job for their entire life, wondering what life could have been like if they had taken a slightly different path. Who knows? You could have ended up like Jeff Bezos and had more money than brain cells. Literally. 200 billion is a massive number. There's a certain point in everyone's life where how high can you count changes from a matter of knowledge to a matter of will. And I wouldn't attempt this one. Counting to 200 billion would take you over 6,000 years. Our brains just aren't capable of even comprehending things that large. It's strong, but not the strongest. Yes, the brain did indeed name itself, but it also recognized that it named itself and was surprised when it realized that. So are we actually as smart as we think we are? We can't see into the future. Unfortunately, we aren't psychic. But always remember, psychics that don't accept walk-in appointments aren't real psychics. They'd be expecting them, right? But although we can't see the future, we do remember the important events that happened in our lives in the past. Some stranger somewhere still remembers you because you were kind to them when no one else was. You've made an impact in their life. You made them feel something no one else could. However, almost universally, you can instantaneously stress out any person just by shouting, "Hey, catch." That was uncalled for, and I'm sorry for that. Getting hit in the face by a ball at that speed would most definitely have you in the hospital. The hospital is simultaneously the building where most people leave without entering, and also the building where most people enter without leaving. We're born against our will. We also die against our will. But regardless, we're here. We're alive. Kids don't really enjoy sleeping. It's always seemed like a hassle to get them to finally go down. It's probably because they haven't gotten bored of life yet. They're young and may be here against their will, but there's still so much to see, so much to do. Kids are all different, but they all have one thing in common. They're brutally honest. The easiest way to tell if you're obese is to ask a kid to draw you. If they draw your stick figure with a line for the body, you're probably fine. However, if they draw you with a circle, I got some bad news for you. You can be underweight or you can be overweight, but you can't be weight. We all change as we age. We grow and we mature. This can be seen in many ways. There was a moment where your mom or dad picked you up as a baby and put you down, only to never pick you up again. You got big, you grew up. If you're still decently young, the odds are that you still haven't met the majority of people who you'll befriend in life. And those are the same people who will inevitably be at your funeral when the lights go out one last time. As sad as it sounds, most guys will receive their first bunch of flowers at their funeral. Go buy your friend a flower. I'm sure he'll appreciate it. If you happen to be older, however, and you go to college at an old enough age, the odds of you taking a history class that are simply life events you experienced is actually quite high. If you happen to be in English class, however, I wish you the best of luck. I understand how English can be difficult to learn. I've always said this. Though only one letter apart, creation and cremation are two very opposite things. And somehow the old you is actually your younger self. It can sometimes seem like it's completely backwards. It reminds me of passwords. Passwords have probably stopped more people from getting into their own accounts than hackers, having the opposite effect that it was intended to have. Protecting your belongings is important, even if you're protecting yourself from you, apparently. Funny enough, there are locks in a police locker room to prevent theft. These are the people we call when our houses get broken into, and yet they can't even stop themselves from stealing from each other. If a cop gets caught stealing, does he, by law, have to arrest himself? Hopefully they'd be on house arrest, because people who were sentenced to house arrest in 2020 really lucked out timing-wise, because we all were too. Luck would have been on your side, and for most, luck is hard to come by. Gambling is only considered an addiction if you're bad at it. Otherwise, you're considered a lucky degenerate. At least you're rich though. But if someone tells you you look like $1 million, don't get an ego. It's less and less of a compliment every year because of inflation. Regardless, plenty of people have struck it rich based purely off of coincidence and luck. Sometimes it doesn't take that much. A lot of Google's revenue comes from people that are just too lazy to type .com after the end of their search. Coincidences can either make us look really, really good or really, really bad. For example, a guy walking around with 1 crowbar is a lot more suspicious than a guy walking around with 3 crowbars. School zones have a very specific speed that you need to be driving at. Drive too slow and you're really creepy, but drive too fast and you start wondering why the speed bumps are screaming. Okay, sorry, that was a pretty distasteful joke.
Your life is flashing in front of your eyes, but you're already dead. If you're not dead, but alive, everything is trying to kill you constantly. Your stomach is constantly trying to kill you. Feeding it makes it stop. You need to drink as well. Being hydrated is a necessity. Drink your water. Normally, you empty your drink from the top, but when you use a straw, you empty it from the bottom. Your lungs are also constantly trying to kill you. Breathing resets that timer too. We really take for granted the fact that most of our body's processes are automated. Aging is a disease with a 100% mortality rate. Maybe that's why aliens aren't visiting us. Maybe they should visit Antarctica though, because Antarctica is statistically the best place to have a baby because all 11 babies born there lived, making it have a 0% infant mortality rate. It's pretty cool to think about that there are only 365 different birthdays for nearly 8 billion people. You live to be around 80, and you spend a third of your life sleeping. But when you sleep, you're just looking at the back of your eyelids for 8 hours straight. And to be honest, sleep is just a free trial of death. So we're all dead. Here's some more shower thoughts. A lot of TV shows have those fake laugh tracks in the background, so you know when to laugh at the really bad jokes. But what you don't really think about is, for the really, really old shows, while you're sitting and watching and listening to it, you're also, at the same time, probably listening to a bunch of dead people laughing. Related, one day, there are going to be more dead people on social media than there are living people. If they still exist, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube even, will be a graveyard of content and information from people who lived hundreds of years ago. It will become the biggest source of information for any event. You'll be able to see how people reacted to presidential elections, to the death of their idols, to the spread of new diseases, to everything there is. You won't be able to see how the world reacted to sliced bread though. Bread is just a loaf of dough, so by that logic, cheese is just a loaf of milk, and an ice cube is just a loaf of water. Speaking of ice, something I find kinda interesting is that there have been entire civilizations who never knew that water had a solid form. The money you earn is never actually yours, it's just your turn with it. Everyone works to survive, and all of the money that you earn actually belongs to someone else. There's a lot of jobs and businesses that bank off of the fact that things in your life can go wrong. Doctors only make money because you get sick. Mechanics make money because your car breaks down. Lawyers make money because you messed up really, really bad. Like, maybe you robbed a bank. But if you do try and rob a bank, you shouldn't have any problems with rent or food bills for the next 10 years, regardless of whether or not you're successful. A jail and a prison are basically the same thing, but a jailer and prisoner are completely different. The company Bic is known for making lighters and pens. Both of these happen to be things that are frequently stolen, which is kind of a pretty good business model if you think about it. Teachers make money off of the fact that you don't know how to, add numbers together or speak a language properly. And speaking of language, you ever just take time to think about letters and words? They're weird and confusing, but kinda cool. It takes more letters to spell the word short than it does to spell long. Also, all the E's in the word Mercedes are pronounced differently. When you say the word forward, your lips move forward. When you say the word back, your lips move back. When hurricanes form, the most dangerous part is the eye. It destroys everything in its path. It's right in the middle, which also happens to be where the letter I is in the middle of the word hurricane. It's kinda cool. Hurricanes are deadly. Everyone tends to talk about and consider the question that is, where do we go when we die? And it's a pretty good question. But no one ever asks, where are we before we were born? The world hasn't changed much over the past 700 years. Today we take pictures of food and put it on Instagram, and a lot of people get super frustrated by this. But during the Renaissance, people would sit around for weeks on end painting a table full of food. You know, you've probably walked past someone that you've played video games with online before and just didn't realize. Similarly, you see people every single day that you will never see again in your entire life. Out of every event that has happened, everything led you both to the same place at the same time, only to veer off path and never meet again. On a similar note, you've probably seen someone on the last day of their life, and you could have never known. To make this more fun though, your future wife is probably telling her boyfriend that they'll be together forever. How cute. You often hear that life is a roller coaster, and I get it, it feels like it. But when you're on a roller coaster, aren't the downhill parts the most fun? You also often hear things that are so easy a caveman could do it. The problem is that cavemen were able to start fires without lighters or matches and were able to kill animals that were 3 to 4 times their size. So, is it really that easy? If you've been using technology like computers or cell phones for years, as most of us have, you've probably scrolled for hundreds or thousands of miles. But honestly, you scrolling doesn't mean you've actually moved anything. When you scroll on your phone, nothing changes except for the color of the pixels on screen. Nothing is moving, it just seems like it. When your laptop overheats, it freezes. No British king would have this issue though, because no ruling British king has ever used the internet. Before the invention of phones, the question, "Where are you?" was probably never asked. Eventually, when you're ordering something or sending a letter or something, you may have to put Earth as a part of your address, maybe when you can live on the moon. You've seen more of the surface of the moon with your own eyes than you will ever likely see of Earth. Actually, if you think about it, about half of the universe is in your field of view at all times. But for now, humans are on Earth. But we're weird. And a little broken. Brushing your teeth is really the only time you ever clean your skeleton. Cleaning is just rearranging dirt. Speaking of cleaning, you should probably really clean your glasses right now. They're disgusting. You really can't clean something without making something else dirty. You also can't move your top teeth. Go ahead and try. You can't hum while holding your nose shut either. Go ahead, try this one too. And while you're at it, you also can't snap your fingers inside your mouth. You ever realize that humans cut down birdhouses to make birdhouses? If you've ever clapped your hands before, you never actually stopped. There's just a really long pause between claps. We do have some redeeming qualities, I guess. We live a lot longer than most animals. If you're over the age of 30, you are alive before every single dog that is currently on Earth. We argue a lot though, over really stupid issues, like whether or not we should eat other animals even though we are animals ourselves. But if vegetarians don't like each other, is it still considered beef? Let's flip a coin and decide. Flipping a coin isn't really a 50-50 thing though, it's random. In a vacuum, a robot can flip a coin millions of times and get heads every single time. Humans only really use it to make decisions less stressful, even though it's a purely random event. Machine learning is becoming a bigger and bigger part of our lives every day, but you observe machine learning all the time. Your brain. Your brain is really good at learning things. This is shown in your dreams. Your brain can recreate scenarios with people you've known for years and just have full-on conversations with them that your brain made up on the spot. Even with people you just met, and it can all feel so real. But no one has ever dreamt about popcorn. Until it happened. And honestly, the person who discovered popcorn had to be super confused when it happened. You ever think about how arms on chairs are just like chairs for your arms? Also, if two mind readers are reading each other's minds, whose mind are they actually reading? It's weird. But what's also weird is that blue is usually seen as cold, while red is usually seen as hot. But blue fire is hotter than red fire. It's likely that another kid is going to grow up in your childhood home, and have a lot of the same experiences that you did while growing up there. They'll use every room, toilet, staircase, and light switch that you did. But why are they called light switches? At the same time, they're also dark switches. Almost everything you have ever owned is still on Earth somewhere. Unless you're Elon Musk, and send your car into space. All of the materials needed to create today's technology has existed since the beginning of the Earth. It just wasn't in the right form or put together yet. You're living in an age where you can be smarter than almost anyone in the past 2 million years. You can be smarter than almost all 100 billion people who have ever lived. You have the world's information at your fingertips. But you'd rather sit here and listen to me tell you what I think about in the shower. I'm flattered, really. But please get out of my house before I call the cops.
As light travels through space, it behaves like a wave, but light is also made of tiny particles called photons. This is the paradox of wave particles, and it has completely revolutionized modern physics. The universe is filled with intriguing paradoxes like this, statements that challenge our understanding of reality and force us to question our deepest assumptions. These paradoxes have the power to change our lives in profound ways, opening us up to new possibilities and reshaping the very fabric of our existence. Here are paradoxes that will change your life.
Well, the lotto jackpot has grown to over $64 million.
It all started with a lottery ticket.
You got the numbers wrong!
If you go out and buy a lottery ticket knowing fully well that your chances of winning are 10 million to 1, it'd be logical to assume you didn't win. You'd also be justified in thinking that your friend, your uncle, his sister, their cousin, and their dog all have losing tickets. You're justified in believing that everyone who bought a ticket will lose, even when you know the lottery was fair and there has to be a winner. Somehow you're justified in believing something you know to be false. This demonstrates that truth is relative. It depends on context, prejudice, and your perspective about the world. Because the truth is, the only thing you can prove with certainty is that nothing is certain. This is why people don't consider Pinocchio saying, "My nose will grow now," to be a paradox. His nose will not grow because he didn't lie. He simply made a false prediction. If we have a set of all sets that do not contain themselves, does that set contain itself? Imagine there's a barber who shaves all men who don't shave themselves, and only men who don't shave themselves. Does the barber shave himself? This is an example of Russell's paradox, a paradox that shook the mathematical world. These paradoxes playfully nudge us into realizing that self-reference can often lead to unexpected contradictions. Contradictions aside though, we all want to be happy, but those who seek out happiness directly often don't find it. This is the paradox of hedonism. If we truly want to be happy, we need to stop searching for happiness and pursue other meaningful activities like nurturing our relationships or serving others. And only then can we be truly happy. The pursuit of pleasure in its raw form often leads to disappointment, while a life lived in service can lead to unexpected happiness. Deep down we all know this. Endless partying, decadent eating habits, and shopping sprees. We know these activities are never as fulfilling as we think they are, and more often than not, we're left with a sense of emptiness after the dust settles. It's called post-indulgence clarity. We see this paradox even in our relationships. Expecting your partner to completely control your happiness often makes them unable to make you happy. At least not in the way you want it. The reality is that to have good relationships, we need to be somewhat independent of them. People think that to find the right partner, they need all the options in the world to pick the perfect person, but in truth, having more options isn't always better. Just look at the fact that we have all these dating apps at our fingertips, and many of us still can't find a healthy relationship. This is the paradox of choice, and contrary to what we think, many options often leave us less satisfied with our final decision. I once watched a TikTok where this guy said men today see more beautiful women while scrolling through TikTok for 5 minutes than kings from the past did in their entire lives, and although it was a joke, he was entirely correct. But it's not a good thing. According to biological anthropologist Helen Fisher, the human brain isn't built to deal with more than 5 to 9 options for a partner. After that, the brain goes into decision paralysis, where it almost refuses to pick. So the next time you feel inundated by options, remember that less is sometimes better, and more data may not always be more informative. Learning is great. Asking questions and figuring out how things work is how our species has gotten to where it is today. But learning is also a paradox because the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. It's an amazing paradox, one that encourages you to never stop learning. Paradoxes are everywhere in mathematics and statistics, like Simpson's paradox. Here, trends that appear in a different group will disappear or even reverse when the groups are combined to form a larger group. In the 1970s, UC Berkeley was accused of gender bias against women in its admissions process. At first glance, the admissions data made it seem like men were more likely to be admitted than women. But when the data was broken down into individual departments, most departments had admission percentages that were significantly in favor of women. The problem was that a higher proportion of women were applying to more competitive departments with lower admission rates, so when compared to all the men in the school, it seemed like women had lower rates of admission, but when compared to the men in each department, it was clear that the women actually had a higher rate. This is, unfortunately, how misinformation spreads. It's usually not with wrong data, but with the correct data expressed without proper context. Because the reality is that often, as paradoxical as it may seem, the whole is different from the sum of its parts. Change is ever present in our lives. The human body replaces billions of cells daily, and every 7 years or so, you are an entirely different cellular collection. So if we're constantly changing, how do we know the person we are today is the same person we were 7 years ago? One might say the essence of who we are remains, but that essence is really just the result of our thoughts, beliefs, and experiences, which are also changing. So who really are you? Maybe you like defining yourself based on your struggles, how hard you pursue something you want to achieve. But have you ever thought that sometimes trying too hard to get something almost makes it impossible to get? It's the backwards law, and it's an interesting concept with lots of layers to uncover. If you're interested in a dedicated video about this subject, Just let me know in the comments below. In 2016, after his infamous penalty miss against Chile, Lionel Messi hung up his boots with his beloved Argentina. In what seemed like the last nail in the coffin, Messi simply had enough. On the club stage, success seemed to come to him so easily, but where he really wanted it, where he desperately tried to do it all by himself, victory seemed elusive. Consider the paradox of Achilles and the tortoise coined by Zeno, the father of Stoicism. In this paradox, Achilles gave a tortoise a head start and races it to infinity. Zeno argued that Achilles will never truly overtake the tortoise because when he reaches where the tortoise started, the tortoise will have moved a little further, and this pattern will continue till infinity. The paradox is silly, but it challenges our perception of movement, space, and infinity. And the realization it leaves with us, especially with Messi's story, is that sometimes no matter how much you try, some things seem just that little bit out of reach. Messi had to accept that part of his legacy was beyond his control. The Argentine Football Federation was underfinanced and poorly managed, and there was no one around him when he needed support. With criticism pouring down from all sides and embarrassing defeats one after another, the dream would remain just that, a dream. Yet, as soon as he let go, the tide began turning. Messi took almost a metaphorical backseat, dropping deeper than his traditional role, playing farther from the goal than he had ever played. His job now wasn't to shine himself, but cast lights on the others, many of whom were young kids who were fans of him when he hung up his boots in 2016. But there he was on December 18th, 2022, nearly 6 years after that missed penalty, lifting the World Cup. Very few stories are as remarkable as Messi's. Most of us live and die without doing or being anything special. Or is that so? If there's nothing oddly special about us, the Earth and the life it holds, then the universe should be teeming with life, and yet it isn't. You might say maybe that it is, and we just aren't advanced enough to search the galaxy to find it, and you'll be right. But considering how young our galaxy is compared to others out there, and that, if given enough time, any advanced species should be able to figure out interstellar travel, if there are any aliens, we should have seen them by now. This is Fermi's paradox, and put simply by a New York Times article, it exclaims, "If life is so easy, someone from somewhere must have come calling by now." Maybe equally paradoxical is the insignificance of the question, are we special, when you boil it down to the individual. There's around 20 quintillion animals on Earth, that's 20 billion, yet the value of a single life isn't questioned. So why do we think that the universe teeming with life will make us any less unique? There's something innately valuable about life. What exactly it is may remain forever elusive. And speaking of elusive things in life, the coastline paradox is a geographical conundrum that originated in the mind of British scientist Lewis Fry Richardson. It's a concept that challenges our understanding of measurement and infinity, revealing a surprising contradiction that's not only mathematical but also physical. Essentially, this paradox states that the length of a coastline depends on the length of the tool used to measure it. The shorter the ruler, the longer the measured length of the coastline. This is because a smaller ruler can capture more of the intricate twists and turns of the coastline. But here the paradox arises. Theoretically, as the ruler gets infinitely small, the length of the coastline becomes infinitely large. Consider the coastline of Britain as an example. If we were to measure it with a 100-kilometer ruler, we would get a significantly shorter length than with a 1-kilometer ruler, which would capture more details of the coastline. And if we used a 1-centimeter ruler, the coastline would appear even longer. Following this logic to its extreme, the coastline seems to stretch to infinity as the ruler shrinks to zero. But how can this be? After all, Britain is an island of finite size. The paradox stems from the fractal nature of coastlines. They have a high degree of complexity and self-similarity at all scales. This is a real-world example of a mathematical concept known as fractal geometry. The coastline paradox is not only mind-bending, but it also has practical implications for cartography, geology, and various other disciplines. It teaches us a humbling lesson about the limitations of our measurements and how they can be influenced by the scale at which we look at things. It's a testament to the unexpected complexities that can emerge from something as simple as measuring a length. The coastline paradox is a stunning illustration of how reality can defy our intuitive assumptions, revealing an infinitely intricate, endlessly fascinating world of surprises. It's a poetic ode to the idea of paradoxes themselves. From being incorporated into movies to revolutionizing reality and the sciences, paradoxes have captured our imagination. Intellectual enigmas, that's what they are. Beautiful puzzles that tease our intellect, challenge our perceptions, and invite us to look beyond the apparent. They hold up a mirror to the complexities of life and the universe, reflecting an intriguing and elusive existence. Paradoxes gracefully illustrate that our universe isn't a mere collection of absolutes, but a symphony of mysteries, wonders, and unfathomable truths. The universe is a mind-boggling place. Actually, I'm not even sure I can call it a place. NASA says the universe is everything, but what they really mean is that it contains everything. All of space, energy, time, and matter like you and me. But there's more to it than meets the eye. Literally. All ordinary matter, like the particles that form us and everything else we can see, only comprise about 5% of the universe. So far, that's all the stuff that makes up our stars, planets, and galaxies, and we've only been able to see about half of all of that with our telescopes. The rest is entirely invisible. It's as if the universe doesn't like being put under our microscope, or telescope, to be more precise. Around 27% of our universe is dark matter, which emits no light or energy, and can't be detected by conventional sensors and detectors. We don't even know what it's really made of, and to be completely honest, we're not even sure it exists. We can only assume. To be fair, we have strong reason to believe dark matter exists. As early as the 1920s, astronomers hypothesized that the universe must contain more matter than we can see because the universe's gravitational forces appear stronger than the visible matter can account for. It's a simple matter of math. Okay, probably not simple math, but you get the idea. As if this wasn't confusing enough, the remaining 68% of the universe is made up of dark energy. Just like dark matter, dark energy is purely theoretical. It popped on our radars in 1998 when the Hubble telescope discovered that, in the past, the universe expanded at a slower rate than it does today. And if the universe is now growing at an accelerating rate, then there must be a force countering gravity and causing this acceleration. Wait, did I just describe repulsive gravity? As you could see, or can't actually, there's a lot of speculation when it comes to developing a blueprint for understanding the universe and everything in it. Even if we focus solely on the visible 5%, there's still a lot to unpack. The universe is a very confusing place, but subjects like math and physics make it easy for us to understand and appreciate the beauty in its chaos. Next time you find yourself gazing at a sky full of stars, take a moment and try to count how many you can see. Let me help you. On a clear night, there's about 6,000. But if we wanted to calculate the number of stars in the entire universe, first we'd have to count the galaxies, and to do that, astronomers take very detailed pictures of small parts of the sky and count the galaxies in those pictures. They then multiply that number by the images needed to photograph the entire sky. Are you ready for the answer? There's approximately 2 trillion galaxies in the universe. 2 trillion clusters of dust swirling in a mostly invisible universe, harboring countless stars, planets, and even civilizations. Our Milky Way galaxy alone is home to 100 billion stars. Using this number as a standard, we can predict that there are roughly 200 billion trillion stars in the universe. A staggering number, I know. It's about 10 times the number of cups of water in Earth's oceans. In our galaxy, the Milky Way, every star has at least one planet orbiting it, meaning there are at least 100 billion exoplanets in our galaxy alone. To date, NASA has discovered more than 5,000 of them. The big question that has been haunting us ever since we developed the mental capacity to ponder our existence in this vast universe is still unanswered. Are we alone in the universe? Well, according to Enrico Fermi, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, considering the young age of our solar system compared to the much older age of the universe, in that interstellar travel should be easy to achieve given enough time, Earth should have been visited by intelligent aliens by now if they did exist. This interpretation became known as the Fermi paradox, and it provides no consolation to our lonely existence. But what if life isn't as unique as we think it is? What if the universe is teeming with countless species far more intelligent than we are? Species that know of our existence and even visit us, only to deem us unfit or too primitive for interaction. Think about an ant colony that you happen to come across through your walk in the park. Would you try to communicate with them? It would be pointless, wouldn't it? If you're having a bad day, you might even go out of your way to step on them. Maybe our entire existence is equivalent to an ant colony placed in this region of the universe by some sort of higher intelligence, an isolated experiment with no particular purpose. Alright, I'll admit that's a bit dark. Let's bring some light back into the equation. Light is the fastest thing in the universe, and in a vacuum it can travel at speeds close to 300,000 kilometers per second. To put that in perspective, light can circulate the Earth 7.5 times in just 1 second. Even at these insane speeds, it would take light 92 billion years to travel across the observable universe. Yes, that's where the measurement light year comes from. Light is strange. It's an electromagnetic wave of massless particles called photons that travel outwards in straight lines. But how can it travel around the Earth if it moves in straight lines? Maybe Earth is flat, after all. I won't get into that right now, but I made an entire video about it. You should check it out. Spoiler, though, it isn't. While light does travel in straight lines, it can also be bent by gravity. Contrary to what we were taught in school, gravity isn't a force. It doesn't pull anything downward. Instead, it just curves the fabric of the universe. If you're confused, don't feel bad. Gravity has confounded the best of us. Winston Churchill famously said that gravity is a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. But we've put our best scientists on it, and while Newton gave us a good understanding of gravity, it was Einstein who cracked the code. To do so, Einstein first had to reimagine three-dimensional space by adding time to the equation. The outcome is a four-dimensional construct called spacetime, and a mass like the sun warps this fabric by creating a valley, and then planets like Earth circle around the valley like a ball around a roulette wheel. This is what we call the force of gravity. Einstein had quite the imagination. Before he was recognized as a genius, he worked as a patent clerk and had a lot of time to think about, well, time. In his special relativity theory, Einstein proved that time is relative to the observer, meaning that when an object is moving really fast, it experiences time more slowly. For example, in 2015, astronaut Scott Kelly spent nearly a year on board the International Space Station, which meant that he was moving much faster than his twin brother Mark, who was on the Earth's surface. Based on Einstein's special relativity theory, Mark aged 5 milliseconds more than his brother did in space during this time. This is called time dilation, and while 5 milliseconds doesn't seem like much, at speeds approaching that of light, time dilation can have much more dramatic effects. If a 15-year-old leaves Earth traveling at 99.5% the speed of light for 5 years, upon returning to Earth, they will find that they've aged only 5 years, while everyone else has aged 50. Mind-blowing, I know, but time dilation isn't exclusive to speed. Gravity can also slow time. The bigger the mass of an object, the bigger the warping of space-time and the slower time moves. It's believed that time freezes entirely at the edge of black holes, at the event horizon. Who knows, maybe time even moves backwards inside black holes. Speaking of black holes, in the 1990s, the Hubble telescope discovered that black holes aren't as rare as we thought they were. Almost every galaxy we know of, including our Milky Way, has a supermassive black hole at its center. We still don't know what they're doing there, but they must have played a significant part since they're at the heart of every galaxy. Maybe galaxies gave birth to black holes, or black holes to galaxies. You know, your typical chicken and egg situation, but on a cosmic scale. Observations from the Hubble tell us that galaxies were born around 1 billion years after the Big Bang, and we know that the Big Bang was created out of a singularity, an infinitely small, hot, and dense point, which is the exact definition of black holes. Could our universe have been born out of a black hole? It very well could have. Have you ever wondered what was there before the Big Bang? Was there a time before time itself? As creatures of time, it's hard imagining a time without time. Okay. This time I'm done talking about time. I'll leave this topic for another video. Here's one to make you gasp for breath. Every atom of oxygen in your lungs, carbon in your muscles, calcium in your bones, and iron in your blood was created inside a star before Earth was born. Apart from hydrogen, every other ingredient in our body is made from elements forged by stars. Stars are basically giant element furnaces. Their intense heat can cause atoms to collide, creating new elements like iron and carbon. Now, aren't you glad there are 200 billion trillion stars in the universe? If you're feeling overwhelmed by the true immensity of it all, you can take a step back and focus your energy inward. There are around 7 octillion atoms in a 70 kilogram or 150 pound body. That's 7 billion billion billion, and these atoms are made up of even smaller fundamental particles like electrons. The study of matter and energy at the smallest fundamental level is called quantum physics, and believe it or not, we still don't know much about it. An electron, for example, can exist in 2 places at one time. It's called superposition. If we're made of electrons and other quantum particles, why can't we be in 2 places at once? Is there something I'm missing here? As I said, quantum physics is a mind-boggling field, but unlike dark matter and dark energy, at least we can observe quantum particles, right? Well, we can, but it's a bit more complicated than you might think. One of the most bizarre premises of quantum theory is that the sheer act of observation can alter the observed reality. One of the most famous experiments in physics, the double slit experiment, demonstrated that particles like an electron could have wave-like properties and suggested that simply observing the electron can dramatically affect its behavior. Like most of the universe, it seems that electrons don't like being observed. They've been proven to be rather intimate with each other. Maybe that's why. Once interacting, subatomic particles can form unbreakable bonds even if they're billions of light years apart. It's called quantum entanglement and is still one of the many mysteries of quantum physics. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance, which sounds like an incredible name for a band. I'll admit, maybe diving into the world of subatomic wasn't such a good idea, but it was necessary. Finding a link between the very small and the large will be the key to understanding everything the universe offers. And despite everything we know, we haven't even begun to scratch the surface. At the end of the day, our existence in this cold and silent universe is as confusing as it is mesmerizing. But there's a certain kind of wisdom in not knowing. Maybe if we did, we'd have no reason to push the boundaries of our knowledge anymore, or worse, we'd have no reason to look up at the stars and just wonder. On a clear night, your patch of sky can be lit by as many as 6,000 stars, so whenever you can, look above and enjoy the cosmic view. You never know what you might discover. I promise it hasn't been 8 months since I last had a shower. This year has just flown by so quickly that I didn't get time to gather my thoughts. My shower thoughts. Dreams are confusing. Some people believe that they can tell the future, others feel that they're just a way for our brains to remember our past. Whatever you think about them, dreams shouldn't be that confusing, right? I mean, after all, our brains are the ones creating them. So why are they also simultaneously being surprised, entertained, confused, and scared by them? Like one half of your brain is creating a short film for the other half to watch. There's a lot we don't understand about dreams, like every time we die in a dream, we immediately wake up. Is it because our brains have never seen what happens after we die, and so we don't know what to create? But if that's the case, how come our smartphones almost never appear in our dreams either, even though we spend almost all our waking hours looking at them? What's even weirder is to think about how many times you've been in other people's dreams that they've never told you about. Anyways, enough about dreaming. The past 2 years have flown by, and things have evolved faster than we ever could have imagined. I recently met up with a friend I had issues with in the past, and discovered they had completely changed. They had outgrown their former self in the best way possible. I was happy for them, but I couldn't help but think that there must be people from their past who dislike a version of them that probably doesn't exist anymore. Along with outgrowing our former selves, we're also outgrowing the world we live in and the technology we use. There's a high chance that most of us will never need to use a physical copy of the dictionary again, and that our great-grandchildren will have to be told what gas stations were. I wonder what those kids are going to be like, and whether the ones who don't know much about history will think of the 1990s kids as basically being the same as the 1890s kids. If you think that's unlikely, right now most of us talk about the ancient Romans as if they're all basically the same, without realizing that the civilization spanned nearly 1,000 years. Speaking of history though, isn't it kind of funny how whenever people talk about traveling to the past, they worry about how doing one little thing differently could drastically change their present reality. But no one thinks about how the principle is still the exact same in the present, even without the existence of time travel. If you were going to just get up tomorrow, move out of the country and never come back, you would be deleting a lifetime's worth of interactions and experiences and replacing them with different ones. You would be creating a new timeline of your life. Unfortunately, no matter what time or place you live, if the theory is true that we only have one soulmate, then the odds of us actually finding them are stacked heavily against us. The good news is that the odds also say that there's at least one person out there describing your exact features and personality as what they want in their ideal partner. So keep looking. As they say, there's plenty of fish in the sea. Before you commit to someone, just be warned. Every relationship either lasts forever or too long. Wait, what was I talking about before that? Oh yeah, fish. Everyone values a human life over the life of a fish, but very few people value a single human life over the life of every fish. Meaning everyone has a certain number of fish that they would prefer to be alive over Bob from work. Same thing is especially true for spiders. I mean, spiders police the entire insect population. Without them, pests would multiply like crazy on our crops and we would be left with famine on our hands. So, as sad as it might be to admit, a room full of spiders might be more important than you and I. There's also a chance that someone you know will use the excuse of your death as a reason to get out of an obligation, and there's also not a chance but a fact that someone in your circle of friends will have no friends at their funeral, because that friend will have been the last one alive. This is typically part of the conversation where whoever I'm talking to tells me to stop fixating on stuff like this and just live in the moment, and I have to calmly explain to them that by the time our brains process the present, the moment is already in the past. The living in the moment paradox seems obvious once you give it a moment, but our brains just can't help saying it automatically anyways. There are a lot of other things our brains can't help but do automatically, like reading every single street sign and billboard you pass by when you're looking out of a car window as a passenger, or listening to all the conversations happening within earshot unless you're blocking them out with headphones or some other distraction. In that sense, being in a foreign country where you can't speak the language must allow your brain to relax in a way that it hasn't been able to since you were a baby. All that forced reading and listening aside, I know I like to dunk on the English language, but it can be pretty cool sometimes. Every single thing that has ever been written in English, from Shakespeare to People magazine, has been written using the same 26 letters. Speaking of those 26 letters, did you know Benjamin Franklin tried to remove 6 of them because he considered them too difficult to pronounce? Those letters were C, J, Q, W, X, and Y. For example, Franklin thought that the simultaneous hard and soft sound of the letter C could be replaced with a combination of K and S. To be frank, he was definitely onto something. Coffee makes you hyper, but coffee shops are places where you go to chill. Alcohol, on the other hand, is a depressant, and yet clubs and bars are so damn stimulating. It's no wonder society changed forever when we replaced alcohol with coffee. It's totally normal and cute to name your cat Whiskers or your dog Spot, but you can't name your kid Leg, Spine, or Freckle. While we're on the subject of body parts, has it ever occurred to you that your teeth are the only part of your skeletal system that require cleaning? It's weird, but it makes sense. After all, our femurs and skulls aren't the ones biting into that red-hot chicken wing. Unless you're vegan, everyone loves the taste of carefully seasoned chicken wings, and why wouldn't we? They represent the pinnacle of human evolution. You're eating the wing that a bird couldn't use to escape us, covered in the spices that were once a plant's best attempt at warding us away, made together in a process that's basically witchcraft. Think about it, you place a dead animal, plants, and spices into a cauldron while following the instructions from a book written by old people. When we're not stealing spices from trees, we're cutting them down, only to force them to relive their demise every single game night in the form of Jenga. No matter how intelligent or advanced we get as a species though, there's some things that nature will just always beat us at. Like regardless of how many trees we kill, we'll still need them to build our coffins, and when you boil water to kill germs, you're still drinking them, they're just now dead. Although exterminators get paid to kill pests, they need those pests to be alive in the first place in order for them to make a living. One good example of us continually trying and failing to be in control of our nature is falling asleep. We practice it every single night, yet for some of us it never seems to get easier. All this weirdness creates a multitude of, well, bizarre things in society that we all just go along with. I mean, we literally concocted the concept of sports just so we could battle one another in a friendly manner. As it turns out, we actually enjoy running around and chasing spheres as much as dogs do. You know, thinking about it, dogs are truly humans' best friend. Sadly, even more than another human. It's why some people will treat stray dogs a lot nicer than they treat homeless humans, and movie scenes where a dog gets hurt often feel more sad and disturbing than scenes where a human is. Just ask John Wick fans whose death hurt the most. Timing is everything. Depending on when you grew up, Barney was either a caveman, a dinosaur, an alcoholic, or a womanizer. If you run at 11 p.m., you're a night person. If you run at 5 a.m., you're a morning person. But if you run at 3 a.m., you're just a suspicious person. Turning your head to someone too quickly is aggressive, and turning it too slowly is ominous, meaning there's a perfect head turn rate to convey maximum friendliness. We all know these things on some level, but the question becomes whether or not we're wise enough to actually use them. There's a difference. Knowledge is knowing that you can carry out all the groceries at once. Wisdom is taking multiple trips so that by the time you're done, other family members have put most of them away. Well, unless you live alone. In that case, keep stacking those bags on your arm like a champ. Family is everything. It's our first gateway into the world, a source of strength, joy, and laughter. At least that's what it's meant to be. Sadly, it isn't for everyone. As a child growing up with a family, the probability that your parents wanted and were expecting you is the highest if you were adopted. Setting aside how wanted or unwanted you may have been, your parents can't escape the fact that it was their job to raise you, and your adult relationship with them is their performance review. Maybe that's why dads tell cheesy jokes. Not because humor gets worse with age, but because the more life experience you have, the more value you place on making your loved ones laugh, even if it's at your own expense. Especially considering the fact that you're more likely to get into arguments with your loved ones than with strangers. By the way, if your parents were wise enough back then to teach you to not believe everything you see on TV, you should return the favor by teaching them not to believe everything they see on Facebook. Social media is strange. The more lonely we are, the more we use it. But the more we're on social media, the more lonely we get. It's like a time loop of depression. If lawyers hope you get sued, doctors hope you get sick, cops hope you're a criminal, and mechanics hope you have car trouble, then only thieves wish you prosperity. At least there's always someone out there rooting for your success. If you're unlucky, they might even be sneaking around in your own backyard. Oh, and by now you've probably recovered from learning that tomato is a fruit, but I also wanted to let you know that olive oil is a fruit juice, coffee is soup, and pizza is a sandwich. This is a red circle. It's also the flag of Japan. It's also a pie chart showing how much of Japan is Japan. It's 100% by the way. You know, your perspective is everything, and in a way, reality can be whatever you want it to be. Neuroscience is the study of the brain, by the brain. It's the study of the brain learning about itself. Claustrophobic people don't like the feeling of being trapped in a small place with no way out. But if you think about it, your brain is trapped in your skull, but you're completely fine with that. Your reality is literally all in your head. Your hands are really just your brain's personal servants to interact with what it perceives to be real. That begs the question, how can we know what exists outside of our subjective experiences if we can't ever step outside of our own head? It's simple. We can't. If the universe is a simulation, it might explain my insomnia. There just might not be any room left on the sleeping server. But even then, the only way you can know you've fallen asleep is by waking up. You have absolutely no idea what happens to you while you're unconscious at night. You sleep for 8 hours a day, meaning you're recharging your body for a third of your entire life. We're really poor batteries, and as with all battery-powered things, we degrade over time. Chargers are honestly just life support for our electronics. Eventually, everything comes to an end. You've probably made multiple decisions that have saved your life without you ever realizing it. But that's not exactly true. It's impossible to save a life. You can only delay a death. It can be scary. We all want to know our purpose in life. But maybe it's better we don't. A cow wouldn't want to know its purpose. Life is actually just generations of kids disciplining other kids hoping that the next group does just a little bit better. Humans aren't eternal. At least not yet. The odds of you dying at any moment are pretty slim, but it's never 0%. We all think humans are the dominant species on Earth, but what if plants were just farming us, giving us the necessary oxygen we need to survive, until about 100 years later when we ultimately die? Our bodies get thrown back into the soil, where plants can then consume us. This is how nature recycles. Death is the end of an old life, decomposition is the beginning of new life. Everyone in the world, even you, is producing carbon dioxide, which plants need to grow to produce oxygen, which we need to survive. So if anyone says you're useless, just know you're helping keep everyone else alive just by existing. It's all a cycle. There's order to all the chaos. Since plants and animals are mostly made of water, the evolution of all hospitals are a good example. In a hospital, you can find people experiencing the worst, the happiest, the first or the last days of their lives. There's plenty of tears shed, in both the best and worst ways possible. But whether you're welcoming a new life or saying goodbye to an old one, some things never change. The number of people older than you never increases. Your right elbow is and will forever remain untouched by your right hand, and the English language will forever be confusing. Have you ever realized that the words short, shorter, and shortest are actually just the long, longer, and longest versions of the word short? Bread goes into the toaster as a slice, but comes out as a piece. English makes me want to light my house on fire. But wait, nothing is ever on fire. It's fire that is on things. But don't worry, you can put the fire out by putting the right things on fire. Got it? Good. Wait, now it's too dark in here. Now that I think about it, dark is written with a K instead of a C, probably because we can't see in the dark. We aren't afraid of being alone in the dark. We're afraid of the exact opposite, actually. Even when you think you're alone, you're not. People cover the webcams on their computer because they're paranoid someone might be watching them. But yet, no one ever covers their cell phone cameras. You're connected to everything, to everyone. If you live in the United States, the driveway to your house is in one way or another connected to every other driveway in the country. And I guess in the same way, you could also say that your toilet is somehow connected to everyone else's toilet through the sewer system, which is kinda cute. Everyone needs a toilet buddy. Your parents always told you, don't talk to strangers, but the only way to make friends is to literally talk to strangers. Honestly, a lot of your social life was entirely predetermined by where your teachers assigned you to sit in class. We even grew up being told not to take candy from strangers, right? So why in any world does Halloween exist? To do just the thing we've been saying not to do? I understand though, you need to be careful with who you interact with. For all you know, you could be knocking at a serial killer's doorstep. If a serial killer is chasing you, you're both literally running for your life. I hope you're quick, but don't run too fast. You might start sweating. If you're wearing a sweater and you start sweating, doesn't that make you the sweater? Okay, we're back on English. Never mind. I would tell you to go inside and cool off, but using solar panels to power your AC is like using the sun's power against itself, and I don't think picking a fight with the sun is the best idea. Given the vastness of space and the massive amount of stars in the universe, if you randomly drew some stars on a page, your drawing is probably a very accurate representation of some particular cluster of stars in the sky. I guess you're just a natural-born artist, a modern-day Picasso. Our perception of time is really warped sometimes. Picasso was alive when the Titanic sank, but at the same time, he was also alive to witness the first moon landing on television. We see these things, these people, as having existed in different times, but in reality, it was a lot more recent than you actually think. But this reminds me, the light of the moon is just a reflection of the sun, right? So, how come vampires don't burn at night? Something is off here. The world is constantly moving. I myself have never been to India, China, or Bangladesh, but about 70 to 80% of all my clothes have. Belts, though, are probably some of the dirtiest items of clothing. People always touch them after they've used the bathroom. But think about it. When was the last time you washed a belt? Yeah. Doing laundry sucks, but I had an idea while doing mine today. If you just put a bunch of brains in a washing machine, is that considered brainwashing? And since we're on the topic of being brainwashed, someone, somewhere in the world, has probably dreamed about being in a relationship with you before. And in my case, I just feel really bad for them. That was probably a nightmare. But hey, every time you meet someone in real life, your dreams pretty much unlock a new character, so you can live the rest of your life out with them to the fullest extent. Until that alarm goes off. Yes, 5 a.m. The hour where you're either up really late or really early. Might as well get up and get ready for the day. Or brush your teeth and get ready for bed. Whatever you're doing at 5 a.m. is none of my business. I can only assume the worst. Time flies like an arrow, but fruit flies like a banana. I mean, fruit flies don't fly like a banana. Even bananas probably don't fly like bananas. Not like I've seen a banana fly. Have you seen... I'm just saying that fruit flies like a banana, okay? I'm sorry, the other day I slipped and hit my head. I still feel a bit woozy and, well, sorry if I don't make much sense. Jason Padgett also didn't make much sense after he was hit in the head in 2002. He was an ordinary adolescent. He didn't do that well in school and considered math useless. One September night, he was out on one of the many night outs he had, and after singing karaoke at a pub, Jason was just about to call it a night. Before he knew it, he'd been hit in the back of his head by two men, beaten profusely and left there with his injuries. People at the hospital sent him home after diagnosing a concussion and a bleeding kidney, thinking nothing more of it. In Jason's head, however, things were far worse. He, almost overnight, developed an intense germophobia and a general OCD with things. He would wash his hands over and over again, and completely locked himself into his home. It was during one of those many hand washes that he noticed the water streaming down the sink. Instead of seeing the droplets slowly recede into the sink like usual, he noticed an almost fragmented reality. It was like a video, he says, that he watched frame by individual frame. He would spend hours trying to draw what he saw in the form of fractal diagrams. One day, he was drawing them while he was at a mall, and a person walking by him took keen interest. He happened to be a mathematician, who for once could appreciate what Jason was seeing in all its mathematical glory. He explained to Jason that the things he was describing were discoveries that were Nobel Prize worthy, and that he should really consider focusing on it full time. At this time, Jason thought he was going insane. He even contacted psychologists about his symptoms. They eventually diagnosed him with acquired savant syndrome and placed him in a synesthesia group study. Synesthesia is a phenomenon of sensory hyperconnectivity where one can experience multimodal sensations, like seeing sound or tasting a memory. Some of our favorite musicians like Lord and Pharrell Williams have it, and Jason was diagnosed with some version of it, although in his case, it's expressed in math rather than music. Jason has now become a number theorist. Scientists say the region of the brain that allows savants to do what they do exists in all of us. It just so happens that most of us don't have access to them. So there could be a number theorist in all of us. Anybody could be anything. Anything could be in anything. But wait, maybe I'm just losing my mind again. Everything cannot be in everything. A country, for example, cannot be in another country, can it? Presenting to you Dahala Kagrabari. It's a part of India within a part of Bangladesh within a part of India. Let me explain. An enclave is a part of a country that is surrounded by foreign territory. The Vatican City is one such enclave. But contrary to the Vatican, where people speak Italian, people living in places like Dahala Kagrabari speak a different language, are part of a different culture, and, quite simply, live a different life. Dahala Kagrabari was one of only 3 third-order enclaves, meaning it is an enclave within another enclave within another enclave. How did this all come to be? Well, this bizarre geographic anomaly seems to have been caused by an equally bizarre pastime. Chess. Yes, when kings of the 18th century weren't executing people at will, they were playing chess with them. It seems to be a result of this chess playing that entire groups of people were just moved around at a time where the borders were yet to be drawn. Fast forward 300 years, the borders are here, but their situation was largely unresolved. These people had no legal existence or a way to get into their homeland. They were not granted basic necessities by the government or the territory in which they reside. After the independence wars in the 20th century in the Indian subcontinent, these enclaves persisted for an additional 80 years before finally, in 2015, it was ceded to Bangladesh by India. Up until then, of course, Dahala Kagrabari was in India. Or was it Bangladesh? I don't know. Now, there are more bizarre things in this world, of course. For example, the group of people that wear sunglasses at night. I mean, what are you doing? Where is the sun? Sunglasses were clearly invented to protect your eyes against the sun, right? Well, not exactly. Turns out, sunglasses were invented for justice. No, not that kind of justice. Sunglasses were most likely popularized by the Chinese in the 1200s. Their purpose? So that the judges can impartially interrogate witnesses without giving away their facial expressions. The eyes can do a lot of the talking, and judges at the time had to dissociate themselves from the people they were about to question. Anyone who has tried to lie or has been lied to knows that the eyes can do a lot of talking in tense situations. Speaking of tense situations, you know the time when man traveled 310,000 kilometers on a journey never before done to walk on the surface of the moon? Well, Neil Armstrong and the Apollo 11 crew made that journey and came back to tell the tale. Of course, they didn't know whether they were going to come back or not. In fact, a lot of the trial runs resulted in the loss of life even before anything left the ground. They were all military servicemen, and so the thought of not coming back wasn't unforeseen. But at least they wanted to ensure the well-being of their loved ones if they couldn't make it. Now, insurance companies know a risky bet when they see one, and to say that going to the moon was risky would be an understatement. So of course, the crew had to improvise. The crew ended up signing hundreds of autographs, with the hope that if they failed to return, the value of their signatures alone would see out the families for the rest of their lives. Of course, those autographs were never needed in the end. But it's interesting to wonder what a Neil Armstrong NFT could be worth in today's money. But willing to spend so much money on NFTs is kinda strange. Even sinful, some might say. This is not the only sinful desire we have in our day-to-day ruminations, of course. It's remarkable how little has changed in that respect. Promiscuity was perhaps harder to get away with back then, but that didn't stop people from trying. One devout Christian, however, Lamarcus Thompson, wanted people to use their time for less sinful endeavors. He wanted to build something that would take people's minds away from the pubs, the saloons, and the brothels that they used to go to. He got inspiration from a coal-carrying train in Pennsylvania. The train would slowly carry coal over a mountain before dropping 60 feet under the force of gravity. Now, that may not sound like much of a thrill ride compared to the things we do today, but in the 1800s, the 60-mile-per-hour speed of this train was enough to exhilarate passengers. Thompson sold his hosiery business and devoted all his time to build what would be the world's first amusement-themed roller coaster. After months and months of designs, Thompson eventually built a 50-foot-high, 600-feet switchback roller coaster in a place known for being promiscuous, Coney Islands. At just 6 miles per hour, this was far slower than anything you and I would consider exciting. But it was such a novelty at the time that when the business took off, Thompson was making well over $15,000 per day. From making underwear to thrilling people into needing more, Thompson died a very rich man. Speaking of underwear, Norway is now calling its military conscripts to return underwear worn during conscription. The obligation seems to have arisen from pandemic-related shortages in the past years. But then again, this is not the first time Norway's resources were spread thin. In 2011, Norway went through a butter crisis that led to more than just dry toast. The regularity with which people in Norwegian cultures consume butter means that when the news of the shortage reached people's ears, butter stocks ran off the shelves in minutes, and there was market-wide inflation. It all started when heavy rainfall in the prior season led to poor grazing, which in turn reduced milk production from the cows. The butter panic eventually affected foreign policy, whereby Norway had to reduce tariffs to make importing butter easier. On an individual level, the effect was just as apparent as people were literally caught smuggling butter through the borders. But I can empathize with the Norwegian people. It is indeed quite infuriating when a system is in place and it doesn't work when you need it most. It's a lot like lab equipment. It always fails when you need it. Anyone who has even spent a brief moment in a lab would know the tension inside that place simply because very simple things cannot be accomplished when lab equipment is not working. Well, it turns out that happens to the best of us. Wolfgang Pauli, the Austrian theoretical physicist, is known for significant contributions to the field of quantum mechanics, most notably by his Pauli exclusion principle. He was a remarkable theoretical physicist, and spent most of his time with pen and paper rather than with experimental equipment. Hence, it follows that occasionally, whenever Pauli would have to deal with equipment, he would break it. It turns out, the faulty equipment became such a regularity that merely his presence was sufficient to convince his peers about why certain equipment failed. They ended up dubbing this phenomenon as the Pauli effect, essentially the tendency of lab equipment to fail for seemingly no material reason, other than the presence of a theoretician. The phenomenon had gained so much traction after its inception that Pauli's friend, Otto Stern, had literally banned Pauli from entering his laboratory, despite them being good friends. Pauli even attempted to write an article, Background Physics, to try and explain things inexplicably breaking as soon as he entered a room. Anecdotes followed that Pauli's car broke down during his honeymoon, a chair broke down at a Zurich festival for no reason whatsoever, the train station ran into a failure as soon as Pauli switched stations, a cyclotron burnt right before his eyes, and so much more. The effect was so eerie that Pauli eventually lamented to himself that such mischief had to have been the Pauli effect. I guess none of us have destroyed particle accelerators or cyclotrons in our lives yet, but we've all messed up things on paper, like using the wrong units when doing calculations. I'm sure it stings, but my teachers always told me that these mistakes are okay, and that as long as I have the concepts down pat, I'm gonna be alright. Right? Well, not for the pilots of Air Canada Flight 143. On a nice July day, a brand new 767, state-of-the-art at the time, took to the skies to fly from Montreal to Edmonton. Less than halfway through the flight, the pilots noticed a fuel pressure warning on one of the engines. The warnings persisted and eventually rang up for both of the plane's engines. A few minutes later, the engines ran out of fuel entirely, and the plane was essentially turned into a very large and heavy glider. Thanks to the exceptional skill, the plane was eventually able to land at a nearby runway turned drag strip with no loss of life, and only minor injuries that took place during the evacuation. The heroics of the pilots were truly highlighted when months after the incident, different crews across Canada had tried to land a 767 in a simulator under similar conditions. Nobody was able to pull it off. But why did this happen in the first place? After all, it was a brand new plane. Well, it turned out, one of the fuel gauges weren't functioning properly when the plane was being refueled. As a result, the fuel amount had to be manually verified before the plane was given the all-clear from Montreal. It turned out everyone involved in the process was trained in the metric system. But the 767 was one of the first jets where the instruments were reported in imperial units. Essentially, the person who was doing the refueling thought they were loading up the plane with around 22,000 kilograms of fuel, when, in truth, they were really filling it up with 12,000 kilograms of fuel, which conveniently comes up to be around 22,000 in pounds. So, the plane took off with less than half the fuel it needed to complete the trip. So many problems in our lives come from simple miscommunication. It really makes you wonder what the world would be like if, say, we all used the same measurement systems or spoke the same language. But humans, ironically, what makes us strongest also makes us the weakest. It's our ability to work together, or the lack thereof. The fate of our entire species comes down to what we should be able to do the best, but instead, we do the exact opposite. Life has a certain irony to it, and I think it's this irony that not only makes life painful, but also makes life worth living. As Thanos said best, life is perfectly balanced, as all things should be. As I was getting ready to go out the other day, I realized I couldn't button my pants up all the way. I realized I was gravitationally challenged, and that I had been growing in all the wrong directions. So I started doing what any reasonable person would do in my situation. Jogged my way to work every morning, checked the gluten content in my rice I was about to eat, intermittent fasted daily, and ate celery like it was my cheat meal. You know, the usual. It didn't quite work out. But now that I was back from the hospital and the therapist, I actually found the smart way to lose weight. Play chess. Yes, chess grandmasters actually lose an astonishing amount of weight over competitions. Over a tournament, they have been known to burn over 6,000 calories per day. To put that into perspective, at the peak of his training, this is about as many calories as Usain Bolt ate. Even the obesity-inclined population of the United States only manages to eat about 3,000 calories per day. And as any dietitian would tell you, the concept of weight loss can be simplified down to the ideas of calories in, calories out. If you are eating more than you're burning, you gain weight. But if you are burning more than you're eating, you lose weight. If these chess grandmasters were on the typical American diet, they would still be operating on an astonishing calorie deficit of 2,200 calories. Even bodybuilders who are cutting their calories don't cut more than 300 to 400 per day. Of course, these chess, let's say athletes, know this and eat more to compensate. But it takes quite a bit of eating to do that, and so most grandmasters end up losing a remarkable amount of weight over tournaments. Some of them burn as many calories over a 2-hour game as Roger Federer playing an hour of singles tennis. There was also a championship that was called off simply because the players lost too much weight. It's also baffling considering sedentary games like chess are usually not associated with anything physically intense that could cause such extreme weight loss. Of course, that is until you realize that our brain consumes about 20% of all the calories that we eat. Chess, being one of the more cognitively demanding games out there, ramps up that caloric demand drastically, which would explain this bizarre phenomenon. But anything to lose some weight and look good, right? But if you're in the mood for some delicious calories anyways, why don't you drive to a Michelin star restaurant in a car with Michelin tires? But wait, do the two have anything to do with each other? The tire company was founded in 1889 and certainly predates the restaurant rating franchise, so they certainly weren't founded at the same time. But are they connected is the question. As it turns out, Michelin realized that they need people to buy more cars and drive farther for there to be a profitable demand for their tires. Driving far was something that people at the time were not in the habit of doing, at least not back then. This was partly down to the fact that the transportation revolution had only recently started, and people were accustomed to traveling only as far as a horse carriage would go. To get people going farther to make use of their tires, Michelin came up with the idea of a list that would rank restaurants based on how much travel they warranted. For example, a 1-star restaurant would simply be a good restaurant in its category, not much else to say. A 2-star restaurant would be worth a small detour, and a 3-star restaurant would deserve a trip of its own. The first edition of the guide was given out for free. With nearly 35,000 copies distributed, it mostly contained routes, gas stations, hotels, and so on. With time, the guide, eventually known as the Michelin Guide, gained legitimacy in the food industry to slowly become the hallmark of fine cuisine that we know it to be today. So yes, Michelin tires and Michelin stars are actually related to each other. You know, it's unbelievable how far some companies will go to promote their products. But if what Michelin did wasn't enough for you, let me tell you what Red Bull did to ramp up demand for their energy drink. As energy drinks gained popularity, Red Bull realized they needed to do something to grab people's attention, something a bit unusual. To give people the illusion that Red Bull was in hot demand, the company started filling trash bins around London with empty cans of the drink. They also gave free samples to DJs and intentionally left cans lying around pubs, all to give people the illusion that people couldn't get enough of this drink. And once that gets people thinking, half the job is done. Then they started wondering what about the drink makes it so seemingly popular, and they went ahead and tried it themselves. And that's the story of how the advertising of Red Bull gave it wings. Oh, wait, about that. So, you know how Red Bull's slogan used to be that it gave you wings? Well, Red Bull does not, in fact, give